Music. All right, hello everyone. This is Lawrence with Hemp Traders Holland, chair of the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board. I hope everyone can hear me right now. We'll try to start the meeting. This will be our first meeting using gotomeeting.com. We're here by remote meeting due to the coronavirus, and hopefully we'll be able to get this to work. First time that we are doing this, so we may experience a few little technical difficulties, so please bear with everyone here. So I wanted to start by taking roll call. I'm here, Lawrence Sertman. I'm with Hemp Traders. I'm representing the Hemp Industries Association. And let's try to go down the line. If other members with the board are here, please chime in and introduce yourself.
I'm here. This is Richard Soria.
This is Val Milano. I'm here.
I'm muted as well. Thank you. This is Van. I'm here.
Hi, Rick Garolas here, representing California Agricultural Commissioners.
Dave Robinson's here, State Sheriff's Association, Kings County Sheriff. And just as a side note, I will have to step off this at 10 a.m. So if you lose me at 10, you'll know why.
It won't even join.
Matt McLean with Buenaventura Coast.
All right. I'm sorry, I didn't hear everyone's name. Who was the person from representing the state or county departments of agriculture?
Hi, Lawrence. It's Rick Garola.
Oh, Rick. Okay, sure. Thank you. And before Matt spoke, I thought I heard somebody else chiming in. Was there somebody there?
Was it John Courier, Badlands Provisions?
All right, it looks like we have, I'll just say the names again, and somebody else is here, let me know. There's me, Lawrence, we have Richard, Val, Van, David Robinson, Matt McLean, and John Courier. Was there anyone else that is here and who has not been mentioned? All right. Great. We'll go up. First thing we'll do is I'll call the meeting to order. It is now 9:10 a.m. on Thursday, May 28, 2010. Welcome to the board meeting and audiences at home attending via the webinar. Now the next part, either I can read or I believe we have somebody else from the Department of Agriculture. Joshua?
Yeah. Yes. Hey, Lawrence. This is Joshua Kress, branch chief for the Pest Exclusion Branch. I'm here. I know we also have a bunch of CDFA staff in the room down at our office. I'm not in the office, so this will be interesting. But yeah, I'm here and I'm sitting in for Michelle Phillips, who's unavailable, unfortunately. So I do have a quick note here before we move on that we always note regarding the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. Meetings of the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board are open to the public and comply with the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. This act allows for public comments on all agenda items. Audience members may address the board following each agenda item. All speakers from the audience are limited to 3 minutes. We generally ask if there are any members of the audience that require accommodation in order to participate in this meeting. So if so, please use the raise hand feature on the GoToWebinar application. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, very good. So If there is anyone that needs any accommodations or is having difficulty using the application, please either raise your hand using the GoToMeeting webinar or GoToWebinar application, or send a message to the Industrial Hemp team at our general inbox, or call our general phone number for assistance, and staff will provide assistance. And that's all I've got for now. Thank you, Lawrence.
All right, thank you, Josh. Okay, so we've done the roll call already. Each board member should have received an email with all the handouts for today's meeting. Copies of the agenda are available for audience members and there's a website, I won't try to read it. All handouts will be brought up on the screen, and copies will be provided, posted online following the meeting. Now, looking at the handout, this will be our agenda for today's meeting. We're only going to be here about 3 hours, so we have a limited agenda. The topics of discussion for the meeting are, first, there will be a brief update on the program activities from the California Department of Agriculture. We will then have a brief update on proposed state legislation for industrial hemp. Then we will have a report on the county experiences on the first industrial hemp season. Then we will have a review of application of seed law to industrial hemp. We have a board members list, which would be posted to our website. We would please ask any board members to check that list and let the Department of Agriculture know if there needed to be any corrections made to that information. There are no breaks scheduled on this agenda, but we will probably take a break approximately every hour or as needed, requested. This time we'll have to have a very brief break, probably no more than about 5 minutes. Quick note on public comments. We will have the opportunity for public comments throughout the meeting, as well as an opportunity for general comments at the end. For comments during an agenda item or pending board motion, please keep comments pertinent to the item or motion being discussed. At the end of the meeting, we'll have the opportunity for additional comments, both related to the meeting and for items not on the agenda. We request all individuals who would like to comment on an agenda item to use the raise hand feature in GoToWebinar. We also request for each speaker to state their name and affiliation before commenting. Due to the large number of attendees, we will be limiting all commenters to 3 minutes unless there are follow-up questions from the board. We will be timing all commenters and will try to provide warnings prior to the time limit ending. Thank you for consideration, and thank you for your consideration as we try to provide everyone with an opportunity to comment during the proceedings. If you have additional questions for the CDFA regarding industrial hemp and the industrial hemp program, please direct your questions to the CDFA staff. You may contact them by emailing industrialhemp@cdfa.ca.gov or calling 916-654-0435. All right. First up will be our agenda item, which will be a brief update on program activities. And I believe Josh will be doing that today.
That's correct. Yep, thank you,
All
Lawrence.
right.
And just very good. And just one other additional note before we move on. I know you guys are familiar with using conference calls and webinars and whatnot, but just a reminder, so for right now, I believe we have all the board members unmuted. So if you'd please mute on your end, whether you're using the web application or your phone, when you're not speaking, we'd appreciate it. And then the staff can try to keep the board lines unmuted, and then we'll be, the staff are going to be handling requests for making comments as we move forward. So, but I thank you for your consideration, and we'll keep things moving. And again, I'm not in the room with the staff, so I'll be just letting them know when I'm ready to move on to the next slide. We've got a quick update that the team put together on the activities that they've been up to since the last board meeting. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, thank you. So what you're seeing here is a summary of registration activities Basically, this is all registration that's occurred so far in the program, the number of current registrants, and the current acreage as far as the registration information that we've received from the county. So this reflects active registrations. The department or the program is currently compiling registration information that we receive from the county. A summary of this is actually updated monthly and posted on our webpage. And then a list of current registrants is also updated weekly and is posted on the webpage as well. So that information is currently available on the website, but this is the current information as of May 26th, a couple days ago. So we have a total of 706 active registrants with a total of 37,770 acres. And that's where we're at so far. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So registration renewals, staff registration renewals began 1 year after we started registration, April 30th. Staff have been sending out notices to registrants with registrations as they expire. Staff will be able to provide more information on registration renewals in the near future as we actually start to receive them. For right now, the program plans to send out notices throughout the year to notify registrants 60 days prior to registration expiration. Try to give plenty of time to the registrants to make sure that there are no gaps or delays in the registration process. So far they've sent out renewal notices to all registrants who are registered through July, through June of last year. Notices with 2 registrants with registrations expiring in July of this year will be mailed out next week. So as of next week, we'll have sent out 362 renewal notices to the various registrants throughout the state. Again, just to try to maintain consistency and make sure that people are aware of the requirement. And we'll go to the next slide. I'll go ahead and go through these, and then we can come back around, Lawrence, for any questions that you or the board have. So the next slide is the revenue summary as of a couple days ago. As you all are aware, the fees are collected by the counties and then forwarded to CDFA along with the registration application. So to date, over the 2 fiscal years, we've received a total of $711,900, as well as 12 registrants who claimed the veterans exemption that's provided for in, actually I don't remember exactly which law it is, I believe it's in the government code. So that's the amount of money that we've received so far. Again, that reflects all registration fees collected since we first started registration on April 30th of 2019. So that's why, as a quick reminder, California's fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. So from the fees that were received between April 30th and June 30th of 2019 would have been for fiscal year 18-19, and then everything since then would have been for fiscal year 19-20. And so that's why we've got 2 fiscal years that we're collecting money across. We'll go to the next slide. So these are the regulations that have been proposed, or we've had actions on since the last meeting. You guys have received notifications on all these, so you should be hopefully familiar with them. As you can see here, we've got sections 4901 and 4902 that were adopted via emergency regulation that became effective on March 17th of this year. Those have been approved, and the program will proceed to permanently adopt those sections through regular rulemaking, and we'll notify the public of the public comment period via the listserv as it becomes available. And then the additional regulations that the program staff have been working on are the sampling, testing, planting, harvest, destruction regulations. We adopted by emergency last year. The second readopt for that emergency regulation was effective on March 24th. And those regulations, the regular rulemaking package for those regulations is currently available for public comment. It was posted on May 8th, and the public comment period for that ends on June 22nd. So if anyone has any comments, you have until June 22nd to submit those to the department. For more information regarding those regulations, including how to submit comments, that information is available on the CDFA regulations webpage. However, if you're having difficulty finding that, please feel free to reach out to our staff and they will direct you accordingly on where you need to go to find that information or provide you with the actual documents themselves. We'll go to the next slide. And again, I'm going quickly here, but we'll come back around for questions and further discussion. So additional rulemaking activities that staff has started the process of working on. At the last board meeting, there was a discussion to increase registration fees by $300. However, part of that discussion was also setting up a subcommittee to look at the registration fees and provide a further recommendation to the board. And so right now, based off of that discussion, CDF and the county have been collecting data to be able to provide that information to the board regarding expenditures and overall activities, to be able to provide further information to seek a new additional recommendation regarding the registration fee. Additional regulations may be needed to ensure compliance with federal regulations, which is required under California state law, and to implement changes from Senate Bill 153 or any potential further legislation that will be discussed on the next agenda topic by Patrick Goggin. Next slide. Oh, actually going back, let's go back to the previous slide, sorry about that. So as far as the registration fee subcommittee, based off of the conversation at the last meeting, that subcommittee is, or that task force is Matt McLean and Josh Chase. And so the two of them will be working with our staff and with the information we receive from the counties, and we'll be reporting back to the board on that. And then one additional note on legislation that will require additional regulations that Michelle had from here. So, which we'll talk about in a second, but once a California state plan is approved, then there are sections of the Food and Agricultural Code that will become effective, including section 81004.5 and 81012. Those sections will likely require regulations as well in order to fully implement those. And so we'll likely need to promulgate regulations based off of those code sections becoming effective. And those 81004.5 is the registration for established agricultural research institutions. And so that will, at the very least, require regulations, and so we'll have to assess that as well. Next slide. Excuse me. So I believe all this information has been presented before, but as you all are aware, the 2018 Farm Bill put into place a new law and a new statutory program for regulation of hemp at the federal level. And USDA last fall established their own interim final rules, their own regulations to implement that new federal law. That requires states and tribes to submit hemp production plans and establishes a federal plan for those states and territories and tribes that do not have an approved state plan. One thing that has occurred since the last board meeting is that USDA has issued a notice that delays enforcement for DEA laboratory registration and the disposal requirements that are outlined in the interim final rule. And so those two items are being delayed enforcement according to the notes here until October 31st of 2021 or publication of the final rule, whichever occurs first. And so that's that direction with, that notification regarding that was issued on February 27th. So it was a relatively or comparatively recent action that was taken. But that's the current status federally, and we'll go to the next slide. So again, California on all states and tribes are required to submit a state plan. The state plan has a wide range of requirements that are listed out there. And so I believe that we've reviewed all of those with you all already. However, very quickly, the status, California State Regulatory Plan, and just regarding what it is. So for us, the State Regulatory Plan is just a compilation of our current and proposed laws and regulations. And then it's got a cover letter, basically, and that's the state plan. So right now, we are currently seeking comments from the Attorney General's office and Governor's office on the state plan before it gets submitted to USDA. After receipt, USDA will have 60 days to review and approve the state plan. And then if and when California state plan is approved, then as I mentioned, those additional sections of the Food and Agricultural Code will become effective, including sections 81004.5 and 81012. Those two sections will come into effect, and then section 81000 will actually be amended upon approval of the state plan. So we do have just a quick note on submission of the state plan. So a draft state plan was completed and approved by the department prior to May 1st. However, the law includes a statutory requirement to submit the state plan to both the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office for review and approval before it can be submitted to USDA. So we are currently awaiting the comments from the Attorney General and from the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office. And then once we receive that, the plan will be submitted to the USDA. However, as you all understand, both the Attorney General and the Governor's office have a lot on their plates right now dealing with the current COVID-19 pandemic, as do we and as do all of you. So we appreciate your patience on that. However, as soon as that the plan is submitted to USDA, notification will be sent out to the public via the listserv, as well as to the board and other interested stakeholders. And that's all I have on the state plan. We've got a couple more slides, so we'll keep going. Next slide. Thank you. So additional program activities for 2020, such as it is. So first, establish the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board for the next term. So right now, all board member terms are going to end actually this week. So we did post a notice to that all of those board positions were up for renewal or vacancy, and we did receive applications. That application deadline is passed. In addition to your guys' positions coming vacant, the law was actually amended to increase board membership by 2 additional members. So there will now be 13 members on the board. Right now, the department is currently routing and the list, and it's in discussions with the secretary for her final approval of who the board members will be for the next term. And so that should be wrapped up soon. And as soon as that's done, we will notify the candidates once those selections are made, make sure that everyone is still willing to serve, and then we'll notify the public and update the list on our website. So that should be done in the very near future, and by the next board meeting, we will have a whole new board. So very interesting, very exciting. But that is ongoing and something to expect for 2020. In addition, staff are continuing to work with USDA on specifically on reporting requirements and other requirements to try to meet the state plan. We've been fortunate that USDA has been very responsive to our requests for additional information and for their assistance on trying to comply as they try to coordinate amongst all the states to try to achieve some level of harmonization nationwide. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we'll continue to send out registration renewal notices as registrations come to their expiration dates. There's an intent and the ability to hire some additional program staff. Currently, staffing for this program is 4 full-time employees and 2 part-time seasonal employees, and that's all they've got. There is authority to hire up to 2 additional program staff members, and so that's part of the intention moving forward. Of course, that is dependent on the overall situation in California and our ability to hire moving forward due to the pandemic and other factors going on. We will continue to collaborate with county agricultural commissioners on administering and enforcing the program and trying to work through new and interesting situations as they come up. We'll be hearing from the county ag commissioners later in this meeting. And then continue to update the online information that the program's been able to provide on our website, including the FAQ, forms, templates, etc. Next slide. I believe this is the last one. So other things that are going on at CDFA that we've continued to work with, or that the program has continued to work with their peers elsewhere in the department. Brenda will be talking a little later in this meeting about the application of California seed law to hemp seed and what that means and what that looks like. So we appreciate Brenda's assistance with all of that. New pests and diseases identified for cannabis species, so cannabis and hemp. The big one that came up fairly recently was cannabis aphid, which was originally found in a couple of greenhouses in licensed cannabis greenhouses, not in hemp greenhouses, but was found in a couple of licensed cannabis greenhouses. And because it had never been found in California, we initially rated it as a quarantine pest until we were able to further analyze it. Fortunately, the counties worked with us to get out and look for this pest, and we found that it was already very widespread and damage was fairly limited. And so we very rapidly were able to downgrade that to what we call a pest of common occurrence, or C-rated pest. However, we are continuing to find new pests and diseases being identified on and for cannabis, whether that is existing pests and diseases that we have in California, that this is a new host, or at least a newly reported host, or potentially new, actually cannabis species specific pests and diseases. So that's work that's continuing to be ongoing. And again, we appreciate the assistance that we get not only from the county ag commissioners, but from the University of California on trying to work through these issues. We're fortunate in California to have the farm advisor system throughout the state. Both Val and Van Van is currently part of that, and Val has a part of that. And we appreciate all the work that all the farm advisors do in helping us work through those issues. And hopefully we'll be able to report some additional information at future meetings. We also get a lot of import and export inquiries, whether that is hemp product or hemp seeds or propagated materials. And so we continue to work through all of those issues with the assistance of USDA trade exports, other states, et cetera. So that's an ongoing issue that staff have been working on. And then Michelle left on here some things that we've discussed in the past, which is the interest in organic certification, the interest of the sale of hemp, homegrown hemp products at certified farmers markets, and then the use of commercial feed or livestock drug products that contain hemp-derived ingredients. And all those have been worked on. Our inspection services division has been actively engaging industry and, in the case of organic, certainly the feds, to work on those issues. And there's a lot of interest not only in California, but all throughout the United States. And so those are some of the topics that are on people's minds right now. And I believe that's the last slide. So we can go ahead and go back. Lawrence, I'll let you take it back, and then I can answer questions, comments, things of that nature.
All right, thank you, Joshua. All right, so he gave his report. So now we open the questions and answers to other members of the board. Are there any members of the board who would like to question anything that Joshua has reported on?
Hi, Lawrence. This is Rick Garola. I would, Josh, if you could elaborate a little bit further on the state plan that needs to be submitted to USDA. Due to COVID restrictions, it sounds like that could still be a while, and then the USDA would have up to 60 days to approve that plan. So is there a likelihood that we may end up operating under federal guidelines this year if we don't have a state approved plan?
That's a good question. So as far as the timeline for submitting, unfortunately, as with everything, it takes a little bit longer going right now due to COVID-19. So we anticipate that it should be submitted soon. I would not expect too significant of delays at this point beyond the next, hopefully, week or two. But yes, you're correct. USDA does have 60 days to review. So a couple notes on that. So first off, we've been, again, fortunate that USDA, they're required to, by the 2018 Farm Bill, to provide states with assistance, and they have been. They've been very communicative. We've fortunately been able to submit them the provisions that we were including in the state plan, even though we have not formally submitted it. We have been providing certain provisions to them for informal review and assistance in trying to work through issues. And so USDA has been very responsive. So we are hopeful that we'll be able to get a response quickly since we have been engaging them throughout this process. But you're correct that there are up to 60 days that USDA would have to review the state plan once it's submitted. assuming that it is submitted in June, 60 days would take us into August, which would give us about 2 months to make any revisions and try to get those into place in order to have an approved state plan by October 31st. I do not personally see it being very likely that any California growers will have to participate in a state plan. That's my personal opinion, not necessarily the opinion of the department or the Attorney General or anything of that nature. But USDA is interested in working with us as best as possible to try to avoid that. USDA is not interested in establishing its own parallel licensing program that growers will have to get duplicate licenses in order to be able to grow in the U.S. So they are working with us to try to avoid that. If that changes and it looks likely, we will certainly engage the board, the commissioners, and the public on that as we try to move forward to let people know of any potential requirements or issues that may be coming their way. But at this point, I don't believe that that's likely.
All right, thank you, Josh. Anyone else on the board have any questions for the recent program activities of the California Department of Food and Agriculture? All right, no questions. Now, this is a little confusing. Are we going to open questioning right now to the general public?
This is Josh. So yeah, generally we would be, so for each agenda item, we would open up to the public, since it doesn't sound like there's any further conversation by the board or any motion. So we would want to open it up for public comments.
Okay. All right, I'm not seeing any of this, so we would now ask any members of the public to use the raise your hand little button. If you have any questions, please provide them.
Yeah, and so again, this is Josh. I'm going to have a question quick for the staff that are in the room there. If you could just try to keep Lawrence up to date and I up to date on what it looks like as far as the number of questions that are being received or the number of hands, so that way we can try to make accommodations. And then as far as comments, so I believe Locke and Maria are on the line, and Locke, one of you guys is going to be reading off any questions that are received by writing, and the other one will be trying to handle the people with their hands raised. So if you guys can coordinate that, we'll go ahead and get that started now.
That's correct, Josh. This is Locke. So we'll go ahead and start with the public comments via verbal, so those who have raised their hand. So I'll go ahead and first unmute April Fall. If you can go ahead and now speak.
Good morning. Can you bring back up the slide that shows the status of all the regulations?
Keep going. There you go.
Okay, and so the first set of regulations have already been formally adopted, and then the sampling and testing are still an emergency, but have been are out for public comment until June 22nd. Is that correct?
Yes, so the first set of regulations there, sections 4901 and 4902, were also adopted via emergency. It was just done recently. We have not begun the formal rulemaking process to adopt those permanently yet. But the sampling, testing, et cetera, regulations are currently available for public comment, and that public comment period ends on June 22nd.
Okay, and 4900 is already adopted formally via legislation as well, correct?
That was adopted via regular rulemaking effective last April, April of 2019.
Okay. And is there, what is the name, the bill that is pending? Isn't there a bill pending that is for formalizing some of the other regulations here?
So as far as regulations, this is what's, excuse me, this is what's currently on the docket. For legislation, for the bills that are under consideration by the legislature, I believe Patrick Goggin will be updating on that on the next agenda item.
Okay. And then is there anyone that's going to be talking about pollen drift today?
I So this is Josh again. I don't believe that's on the agenda for today, but that might be a good topic for the conversation at the end of the meeting for maybe future meeting discussions. But I don't believe that pollen drift or anything of that nature is on the agenda for the day, unless it's been an issue for the commissioners that they'll be reporting on.
Okay, thank you. And could you just go back one more slide and then I'm done with questions. Thank you.
And just a reminder, so for everybody, all of the presentations that are put up today, staff will be posting those on the website as a PDF, and then of course they'll be included in the recording of the meeting as well.
All right, was that all of your questions? All right, let's go to the next question then.
Okay, so next person will be Victor Barrio. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you now, Victor.
Hi, everybody. Just curious to see how the state of California is going to be handling licenses for manufacturing and processing, or if they're even going to have that be a mandatory thing, as Oregon does have that.
Hi, so this is Josh. I'll go ahead and take that really quickly. So right now there are no laws or regulations regarding those two items, but that's something that I believe will be covered on the next agenda item when Patrick Goggin talks about proposed state legislation. Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go to the next person. And also, when you get online, please restate your name and then where you're from.
Next person is Ron Kubota.
Kubota, good morning. Hi, my name's Ron Kubota. I'm with Evio Labs, and I was just interested in getting clarification. It seems to me that it'll be until after the public comment period on the sampling and testing on June 22nd before there is any guidance or rules or on sampling and testing up to and including pre-harvest for the state, so that we're trying to plan. We do it in Oregon, pre-harvest sample collection, and also, analysis for R&D and regulatory compliance in both. We have a lab in Berkeley and operations in Oregon as well, and we're familiar with hemp. But could I get a little clarification and when that might be coming?
Sure, this is Josh. So if we can go again to the next slide here, and I can run through that very briefly. So we do currently have regulations regarding sampling and testing. They were adopted by emergency last summer. And so those emergency regulations are effective. And so those are the current regulations that are being applied in the state of California right now. And then we've proposed amendments to those regulations and to adopt those regulations permanently, and that's what's available for public comment. So available on the Hemp website, there's a copy of the current laws and regulations, which includes the existing emergency regulations that are currently effective. And then to visit, and then on our regulations page, we've got the proposed regulations that would take effect after the public comment period. Those are currently available for public comment, and that public comment period ends on June 22nd. So we do have existing regulations, but we've proposed amendments to those regulations, and that's what's available for public comment.
Sure, and thank you. And it looked like at my read of those proposed regulations, there was still language with regards to DEA laboratory certification. No?
Unfortunately, so two things: I don't have those regulations in front of me, and then if there are any comments or questions on the regulations, since we are in the middle of the regular rulemaking process, there's a formal process for that. But if you have questions regarding that, please feel free to email staff, and they will answer what they can, and everything else will get routed through our permits and regulations office to respond.
Sure, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, do we have, thank you for the good questions. Do we have anyone else who'd like to ask a question?
Yes, Lauren. So we have one more, Marcelo Mota. And I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Are you there, Marcella? All right, we're not hearing anything. Maybe. Are you there?
I do not believe Marcelo is on. We'll go ahead now, Lawrence, to go towards the written comments.
Just a quick question, Locke and Maria. How many written comments are there? Just so we kind of know where we're at.
4, Josh. And this is
Okay,
Maria.
perfect. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Maria.
No problem. So this question is from Wayne Richmond and asks, farmers will under the 2014 federal plan until new plan approved?
So Wayne, that's a good question. I think that's a good topic for the next agenda item with Patrick as far as legislation, the current legislation status. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a better answer for you on this one right now.
So the next question comes from Martha Alcala, and her question is it possible to get a copy of the California Industrial CCR sections that became effective?
Okay, and the answer to that is yes. Actually, you contact Maria. So they're currently available on our website. So if you go to the Hemp, CDFA's Hemp website, there's a copy of the full laws and regulations. I believe they're actually included as an attachment on the application for registration. And then if you have trouble finding that, you can email our team at industrialhemp@cdfa.ca.gov or by calling our main line.
Okay. The next question comes from Christopher Boucher. And his question is, what is the THC testing time frame from test to harvest?
Hi, Chris. And so that's, again, that's a good question. We would have to check the actual regulations to be able to answer that. Maria and Locke, if you would like to, and you know the answer offhand, please feel free. Otherwise, we can get that information to you offline, but it is listed in both the current and proposed regulations.
Christopher Bouchard, Christopher Bouchard Boucher from Farmtiva. Farmtiva, what is the THC timeframe from testing to pre-harvest to harvest? Is it proposed 11 days?
So again, I'm going to defer to the regulations. If there are questions regarding the proposed regulations, please refer to the regulations themselves. And if you have questions on it, there's a process to ask questions or to submit comments via the formal rulemaking process. You can submit questions to the Industrial Hemp team. However, if there's something that they are legally not allowed to answer due to the formal rulemaking process, they will provide that and work with our regulations unit to be able to respond to you. As far as the current time frame, California state law currently requires that and Maria, please correct me if I'm wrong, but California state law currently requires that the sample be collected within 30 days of completing harvest. Is that correct?
That's correct. Sampling must be collected days prior to harvest.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So that's the current time frame that we are working with. USDA has a 15-day time frame, and we are working with USDA to accommodate that, and there is language in that in the regulation. So again, if you have comments regarding the proposal itself, please reach out to staff and follow the process that's listed out in the notice of rulemaking. Thank you.
And then there's 3 more questions coming from Wayne Richmond. His first question is, will be under old plan versus new plan?
So Wayne, unfortunately, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but if you can clarify, I can try to provide an answer.
And then his following
Go to the next question.
And then his following question has been answered already. Did the testing time frame change to 11 days before harvest? So no, it currently hasn't changed. It's still 30 days prior to harvest. The next
So
question.
no, again, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, I was just going to reiterate again that if you have questions or comments regarding the proposed regulations, please see the public notice to either ask those questions or submit those comments. Thank you. Go ahead, Maria.
There's no additional question.
Oh, that's it? Okay.
Oh, sorry, Josh. There's one more. Okay, and this comment comes from Marcela Mota. Increasing registration fees or having any fees at the beginning of new business industry is counter-nurturing to launch any new business industry and demonstrates a bureaucratic process mentally. I request that the state would provide grants to launch the industrial hemp industry to be pro-business as it is traditional in California. And Marcelo Mota just sent another comment. I would like to comment that this new, very involved process is very conducive to successfully launch a new California hemp industry. This new hemp industry must be streamlined and low cost, and so it will not drown on bureaucracy. Okay. And there's no more other questions.
All right, thank you very much, Maria. If we have no other questions, then I think we can move on to our next topic, which will be a brief update on proposed state legislation for industrial hemp. And I believe we have Patrick Goggin on the line to go over that.
Good morning, Lawrence. And I have board Patrick Goggin here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great, great. So I just wanted to provide a brief update on proposed legislation, both in form and on its way. Prior to the COVID situation, we were fortunate enough to have Senator Scott Wilk introduce SB 864. Senator Scott Wilk has taken over, as many of you know, as our hemp champion in the California State Legislature for Senator Mark Leno, and he's been carrying legislation for the past couple of years. Presently, the bill has gotten out of the Senate Ag Committee and will be before the Senate Appropriations Committee on June 1st. And under the rules of the legislature, needs to get out of the House of Origin by June 26th. So then it'll hop over to the Assembly and be heard, I believe, in August after the July recess. Right now, the bill has just a couple of components. We started out with some fairly vanilla, non-controversial provisions, but one really exciting provision or really positive provision that came out of the interim final rule, and these are largely to conform to the interim final rule that have been discussed, and that is the inclusion of a measurement of uncertainty by the labs when doing their THC testing, such that, say, if the process has a measurement of uncertainty being somewhat similar to a margin of error, but that, for example, if the measurement of uncertainty through the technology is less than, it is 0.05%, then following that train of thought, the limit would end up being 0.35 or less, if that makes sense. And we can come back to any questions that anybody may have. One of the other things that was required in the IFR is a reporting to the Farm Service Agency of the location, acreage, and registration information of folks that are farming hemp. And we had originally, the way it's been drafted was the reporting was to be done by the CDFA, but in fact, that's going to be changed to be done by the farmers. And then just go through quickly some of the amendments that we anticipate taking in August when the bill gets to the Assembly. I know some people will be encouraged to hear we're going to add language in addition to destruction of hot hemp, adding disposal of the hot hemp, and that conforms with language in the Farm Bill and in the interim final rule, and really is intended to provide additional flexibility for our farmers. And I appreciate that this issue is one of great importance to our farmers and needs to be addressed and is a priority of the California Hemp Council. If I didn't mention that in the beginning, I'm here as General Counsel for the California Hemp Council and on behalf of Hoban Law Group, and it's a top priority of ours this year on behalf of the industry and the farmers. There are a few additional amendments that will be taken to address issues that have been raised by some of the agricultural commissioners, and that is regarding authority for site visits, annual inspections, and enforcement authority. And then another issue that has come up is around volunteer plants and how to address that. So we're going to be continuing to work with both CDFA and the agricultural commissioners and the rural counties and other interested stakeholders in working to ongoingly refine and improve our state statute. Some of the issues that CDFA have brought up are largely technical in nature, including syncing the definitions of hemp. There are two definitions, one in the Health and Safety Code, the other in the Agricultural Code, and syncing those up for consistency purposes. And then there will be some addressing of the sunsetting of the 2014 Farm Bill Pilot Program Authority. And I think Wayne was getting into this a little bit, but we will be under the 2014 Farm Bill until a state plan is approved. But there's the 2018 Farm Bill indicates that Section 7606, the 2014 Farm Bill provision, will be repealed and sunset a year from the date that the USDA establishes a plan under the 2018 Farm Bill for states or for farmers that are in states that haven't submitted it and had a plan approved or prohibit hemp farming. And I think there's a real question right now as to whether they've actually, quote unquote, established that plan. The secretary or deputy secretary for the Department of Agriculture earlier this year indicated that the plan or the regulations are not final. So, and many states are continuing under the 2014 Farm Bill because of the outstanding issues within the IFR, and the USDA has indicated that a number of those provisions are flexible and they can be changed. The provisions that cannot be changed are those that are directly written into the Farm Bill itself and the statute, and that's largely regarding THC limitations and post-decarboxylation methods. So whether or not the 2014 Farm Bill provision will actually be repealed in October of this year remains fully to be seen. So keep an eye on that. And then regarding, if you could go to the next slide.
Patrick, before you go on to the next legislation, could you elaborate a little bit more on the language of the disposal versus the destruction?
Yeah, so what we're going to do is just add in disposal where it says destruction. We'll say destruction or disposal, or and disposal, or and or, so that it's which is done in the IFR itself. I think there's 70 places where it says disposal, and then there's other locations where it says destruction. So we're going to add disposal, so that it allows for further alternatives and does not actually require destruction, if that makes sense.
All right, and then before we go on to the next legislation, I just wanted to ask if anyone on the board had questions for the one you were talking about just a moment ago.
Oh yeah, SB 864.
Yeah, SB 864. Yeah. So does anyone on the board have any other questions about SB 864 before we move on to the next legislation? Okay, no problem. Please carry on, Patrick.
Thanks, Lawrence. So as many of you know, we introduced last year, Assemblymember Cecilia Aguiar Curry, AB 228. And AB 228 was focused on the CBD hemp extract issue and declaring that it is not an adulterant in the state, and looking to other states and as models, in particular Colorado, and that it's not an adulterant so long as it's manufactured and processed in a food manufacturing facility, or in the state of California, a processed food facility. And unfortunately, after we worked really hard last session and did not have any votes against the bill, it got shelved at Senate Appropriations at the 11th hour, in large part because we were working to create a pathway for hemp products into cannabis retail, and the cannabis folks, or some of the interested stakeholders raised an issue surrounding the testing of the hemp that's going into cannabis retail, and largely it's around testing for pesticides and chemicals. And we had worked, and in my last presentation, we had indicated that we were going to seek to bifurcate the bill to separate out those provisions, so we had a clean focus and clear focus on CBD not being an adulterant, and getting regulatory authority of the manufacturing of hemp extracts and food by the Department of Public Health as food manufacturing facilities, but that unfortunately did not occur, and the bill was shelved. And with the commitment by the administration to continue to work with the industry, together with the cannabis folks, to craft some compromise, and so that we could all move together on the legislation. And that was done. We did that over the off session, and where we agreed to add a panel for testing of hemp extracts in COAs of the pesticides, but that it doesn't have to be done, just to be clear, that it's done by ISO certified labs, not cannabis licensed labs, and not following cannabis licensed protocols, but merely adding additional contaminant testing, which is largely done by many folks in any event, but that helped get us to a place where not only did we address the issues that those folks had, but also, consumer safety and consumer protection component to the bill that makes our products in the state as safe and healthy and clean for our consumers as possible. We had been working with our coalition, meeting with the administration prior to COVID occurring, and it was on track to be reintroduced either actually as a new standalone piece of legislation, but all the while with the potential strategy to try to get it into the budget. And another component of the bill is also that it has an urgency clause, so that as soon as it is passed, it will go into immediate effect. And other things that the bill will do, and as part of addressing the testing concerns, is products will be required to have a QR code similar to many other states that lists the amount of CBD and THC in the product, as well as the contaminant testing, biocontaminants, as well as chemical contaminants. And the other thing that we've looked at is, and we've looked at other states and how they're doing around the limitation, the THC limitations in the product versus the ingredient itself, and we are looking towards limiting the actual ingredient as opposed to the product. There are some concerns that if we got up to 0.3% in the product itself of, say, a water or a liquid or some large product, that it could be quite intoxicating. And so we are erring on the side of caution and limiting the THC content to the ingredient itself and not the product as a whole. Other components of the legislation that may wind up in a bill that's passed includes potentially shared use facility for cannabis and hemp, but the products that would be produced by and also cannabis licensed facility would, and then they end up going into cannabis retail, would have to work through a licensed cannabis manufacturer. And the final point here is that given the budget deficit and the COVID paradigm right now, we are not looking at a standalone legislation here, as we did and have set in place early on with SB 864. We are hoping that and targeting getting into supplemental budget that we anticipate will be introduced and worked on in August. And that's all I have for now, so open to any questions.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Anyone on the board have any questions for Patrick regarding proposed state legislation on hemp? All right, no questions from the board. Let's open it up to the audience and the general public. Does anyone there have any questions regarding the proposed state hemp legislation?
We do have one person who has raised their hand. That would be Christopher Boucher. So Chris, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now. And if you can just unmute yourself as well. And it looks like Chris is idle at this time, so we'll go ahead, and that's all we have for raised hands. So we're going to go ahead into our the written comments, Lisa.
Okay, Stan Whipple asks a couple questions. Okay. Okay. Actually, the question comes from Taylor Roshan and asks, will the proposed legislative language on disposal have a delayed implementation date as USDA has proposed on the interim final rule?
I don't know if that is going towards the DEA, the requirement that it be a DEA registered, I think a reverse distributor or something like that. But we wouldn't be including that language, and I don't see any delay in adding the disposal language other than that the bill would go into effect. My understanding would be that January of next year. Maybe Taylor has a follow-up.
No. The following question comes from Kareem Kassim, and she asks, is there a pathway for hot hemp to enter the licensed cannabis industry?
Not at this time.
Wayne Richmond asks, have there been any other stakeholders besides Patrick been presented at those meetings?
At what meetings? No. I can say that. Well, so the CHC represents a number of stakeholders, but there are plenty of other stakeholders at the table. The U.S. Hemp Roundtable. We are often in conversation with folks like Lawrence and Matt with the California Hemp Industries Association. There are a number of other folks at the table from both the cannabis and the hemp side. And I can say that I generally am not at the table, and that there are multiple other folks within the California Hemp Council that are handling those meetings.
Okay. And then Wayne Richmond also asks, have you been working behind the scenes with CDFA while there has not been any IHAB meetings?
Oh, we have ongoing dialogue with CDFA all the time.
Kareem Kassim asks, Section 4943B indicates the date May 1st, 2020. What will this date be amended to?
If I'm understanding that question correctly, I believe they're referring to the date that the state plan needs to be submitted and under statute. I think, is that what they're referring to? Do we know? But assuming that, as I would defer to CDFA on this, but as Joshua Kress indicated, the draft has been completed and is in review. The CDFA has been communicating with USDA on the provisions of the state plan. It's clearly COVID and the pandemic have had an impact on things, and it seems to me that CDFA is meeting the spirit of those requirements.
Okay. Victor Vario asks, what happens if the flower jumps over total 0.3% THC after it has been cured?
It's the test that controls. It's the test report that controls. If the hemp is tested through the protocols and the regulations, it will come, and test below 0.3%. And in the future, we'll have this measurement of uncertainty added to it. The test report comes back as either passes California hemp or failed. There's a failed document. So if it passes, then it passes, and that's the hemp ticket to get into the marketplace.
May I elaborate a little bit more on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the reason why I asked this is because we're a stakeholder in the smokable hemp side of things, and we're actually getting to do some national distribution for our brand and for some of our partners. A lot of our clients are asking for the final product to be tested, and everybody really thinks that the USDA rules that came out of total 0.3% is elaborating, or it goes towards everything, even the final product. But as far as I'm concerned, I've always thought kind of what you said. As long as it passes the total THC during the pre-harvest, then it's now hemp and it's into the system. But you know, what happens if somebody does get pulled over with smokable flower that does test, 0.45 in total, but it's already been certified as hemp through the California state?
Well, the best way I would advise or see to approach that is to provide that test report travel with the hemp and be available. Or having a QR code on the package that links to the COA, so that's what these are all being created for. And in the future, you hopefully will have a national database that law enforcement can draw upon. But in the meantime, use the QR code and have the QR code linked to that COA.
And that is what we do. We definitely have QR code covering all our bases on that side of things. There's just a lot of confusion based on what the pre-harvest test says and after curing, because after you do cure the product in the right way, it loses moisture, the THC levels do jump up. The Delta 9 stays the same, but the total THC ends up jumping up. So is there a way that I can contact somebody to get this in writing so I can kind of have it with me to be able to show our attorneys and show our stakeholders?
I don't know. I think I would defer to CDFA. I'm a private attorney. We could always talk offline. My name is Patrick Goggin, and CDFA could probably provide my contact information. But Josh, do you have a response to that?
I don't have a particular response to that, no. Sorry. I don't think I have any additional information I can provide besides what you already said.
Could you just provide me with your contact information real quick and I'll reach out?
Actually, if you want to just go ahead and send your information to the Industrial Hemp email address, we can forward it along.
Okay.
Or if you just send a note to staff right now, we can forward it. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.
There's a couple of questions coming from Wayne Richmond, and he asks, why is not the CHA not invited to the table?
Wayne, the CHA is always welcome to reach out.
The next question comes from Kareem Kassem, and she asks, no, section 4943B is when labs are required to register with CDFA.
This is Josh. So I believe that question is, and the staff in the room down there can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this question is regarding the proposed regulations. So again, if you have questions regarding the proposed regulations, go ahead and reach out to our industrial hemp staff, industrialhemp@cdfa.ca.gov. They will assist you as best as they can, and anything that they're not allowed to answer, they will provide to our regulations unit, who will be able to respond as well. But I believe that's regarding the proposed regulations, correct? Maria Locke?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, that's a question regarding the proposed regulations. So please direct those either directly to staff or to our regulations unit, and they'll work together to respond to any questions that we receive. Thank you.
The next question comes from Aaron Gravitz, and he asks, is the June 22nd, 2020 date the day these proposed rules will go into effect?
This is Josh again. So again, this is about the previous agenda item about the regulations. So let's the end date for the comment period. And I believe we've discussed, but I'll just state very, very briefly that we follow the Administrative Procedure Act for adopting any regulations. They provide for a 45-day public comment period on all regulations. That's what we're in right now. CDFA has to respond to all public comments and submit the package for certification for the regulations to the Office of Administrative Law, who has to review and approve it. And so, no, it would not take effect on June 22nd. We will work with the Office of Administrative Law to determine what that review process looks like and when any proposed regulations would actually take effect. But that's the end of the comment period. And so anyone can submit comments on the regulation until June 22nd, after which point we will work with the Office of Administrative Law regarding the final submittal and review, approval, and effective date for the regulations themselves.
Okay. The next question comes from Carmel Underlinger Abraham, and they ask, can you clarify the mentioning of total THC percent for legal hemp products? I thought I heard 0.35%. Will the needle be moving more towards 1%?
Yeah, so that was in relation to the measurement, adding in a measurement of uncertainty to the 0.3%. So I use that as an example. If the measurement of uncertainty was 0.05, then the limit would be raised to 0.35 as an example. But no, right now the limit remains 0.3 with the consideration of a measurement of uncertainty added into that equation. I don't anticipate that we're going to see a change in the THC limits until well, we're not going to see it in the state because it's driven by the USDA and the Farm Bill, and so any change will need to be done legislatively in Washington D.C. and I would anticipate that most likely the earliest time that would occur is in when the next Farm Bill is being considered and adopted in 2022.
Carmel also asks, what organization is the person who asked about the smokable hemp products from?
I don't know. I think that was a private. I think that was a company.
Okay. Wayne Richmond asks, why would the U.S. Hemp Roundtable have any seats at our table?
Well, because they have hired, the U.S. Hemp Roundtable hired a lobbyist in Sacramento, and anytime that there is an advocate of an organization on this issue in Sacramento, we're going to work with them.
I've got a comment from Melissa, and Melissa also raised her hand, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Melissa. And if you can unmute yourself. But she also had a question of, I have several, she has two. She has, can a fee waiver be added for veteran, disadvantaged women, and disabled farmers? And in addition to that, she also states, I have several hundred acres. Why can't I grow both crops as long as they are kept separate? And I'm assuming she meant hemp and cannabis.
I've been getting some feedback, so I didn't hear that clearly.
And I think the feedback is coming from Melissa. So if Melissa, if you want to, I'm going to go ahead and unmute.
Is that better?
Yes, go ahead,
I
Melissa.
I apologize. Yes, that's correct. Both cannabis, hemp, and cannabis marijuana. As long as they're kept separate, it seems like I can't to do both on the one property for maybe bureaucratic reasons. Maybe it could be just simple agriculture. It's going to mess one up or something. But it seems like with this much space, it's an issue to keep it separate. But more importantly, I work with several organizations here in Southern California with veterans and women entrepreneurs, and I'd like to be able to maybe take 20 acres. I have different properties all over California, and some of them are smaller, 5 acres, 20 acres, and I'd like to be able to encourage, maybe have one of the 5-acre spots opened up for someone who wants to learn to be a farmer and they're disabled or something. But a lot of times veterans, single mothers, disabled people, they don't have, and of course historically disadvantaged, they don't necessarily have $900 to pay for a fee every year, at least not in the beginning. It seems like a cumbersome step that would maybe inhibit well-meaning people from being able to legally participate in the system. Is there some way a language could be added that would alleviate this burden?
Well, I'm wondering if there's, with the CDFA has a response to that, and if there are any opportunities for exemptions from the fee or for the disadvantaged or low income. I don't know.
Yeah, so Patrick, I'll take part of that question. So as far as veterans, so if you are, there's a provision, again, I don't recall which code it's in the law somewhere, and our staff can provide that information upon request, but the law does provide for disabled veterans and veterans generally who have been who have been discharged from the military. They are eligible for fee exemptions for a wide range of license and registration fees throughout the state government, and it has been determined that the hemp registration fee is included in that. And so, if you are a discharged veteran, I believe that you are eligible for that fee exemption. If you would like more information on that, please feel free to reach out to our staff. They should be familiar with what those code sections are, and I can certainly provide them with some assistance. But veterans are eligible for that based off of that other code section. It's not the Food and Ag Code. It's not specific to hemp. It's actually a general provision. Regarding any other exemptions, I don't believe that we necessarily have discretion. I mean, that might be something we can discuss as we move forward with discussions on the fee itself, but I don't believe we have any other discretion. There's not any other code sections that I'm aware of, although if anyone is, please let us know and we can look into it further. But Patrick, as far as, if the those that are carrying the bill are interested in including any provisions or making any changes, that would be kind of your realm. And then regarding the property question, and Patrick, you could probably answer this as well as I can, or even better. But the Senate Bill 153 last year that Patrick and the California Hemp Council worked on, that included a provision that requires that hemp not be grown on a licensed premise for cannabis. And so we've been working with the county agricultural commissioners to determine what the actual premise is and make sure that there's no hemp being grown on that actual licensed premise, and how to best interpret that and ensure that there is separation between the crops as there are different regulatory requirements. But that's the law. It doesn't use the word property, it uses the word licensed premise. If you're a licensed cannabis grower, you have a premise that you have been licensed to grow on. And so we're currently engaging and working with the county ag commissioners and others to try to work with growers to ensure that the premise that the cannabis is being grown on is separate from the registered site that hemp is being grown on, and how best to ensure that there's separation while still meeting the requirements and the spirit of that rule.
Yeah, but to put the final point on that is, yes, you can cultivate hemp and cannabis on the same property so long as they are in separate and distinct and separated premises.
We do have 3 more raised hands. So Justin Eve, if you can go ahead and speak. Okay. Seems that Justin is unable to speak. So we'll go ahead and go to Marcelo Mota. I'll go ahead and unmute you now, Marcelo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this is Mr. Mota from Loving Valley Farm in Tulare County. And I just want to go on the coattails of the young lady that spoke before, that looking at this process and being familiar with the other process, is that it really appears to be very suffocating. And I know everyone seems to be very well educated in these state processes. But I think we're missing the point from a 40,000 foot level in the state of California. And one example is when we have a baby, we don't start giving it adult food. We let it thrive. And I don't think we're getting the business lens to take the advantage of what we're having here. We're hampering this industrial hemp process, which was, taken out of circulation back in Prohibition. And I know you mean well, but I think we have to not have cataract eyes and not have cataract ears with all this bureaucracy in the beginning, where there should be a severe grace period for this to start, or it will fail to launch. And I don't think all you well-meaning people are actually seeing the burden you're placing on this potential for everyone in the state of California and the coffers and the treasury and for all the income. One main example, which people down in Silicon Valley did, they did not tax PayPal. They did not tax any online purchases in order for it to thrive to the behemoth that it is now. And now recently, San Jose just enacted its taxes to collect the sales taxes from online and many other states too at the location where it's at. So it's really, what I see is you really get to burden this before it even goes forward. And you have to look at it at the 40,000 foot level. And it's going to be a lost opportunity. And a lot of people are being excluded, even the disadvantaged or the people who don't have enough finances but have a lot of land to get into this and become part of the tax revenue. That's what we're really talking about, is you're going to leave out an enormous amount of people from the tax revenue, from the suffocating blanket of bureaucracy that should not be taking place
Marcelo,
in 5 minutes.
If you can just give us your, okay, thank you.
So please don't suffocate this opportunity. And that's what you have to say. Don't suffocate this opportunity for the first 5 years. Thank you, board.
All right, and listen, I'd like to answer that last comment a little bit. And I know all the members of the board, and I've met with all the employees of the Department of Agriculture, California Department of Agriculture. And, in private, we absolutely all agree with you. We would all like to see, the least amount of regulations and allow the farmers to grow it just any way they want, under their own guidelines. Problem that we have is that we are under both California law and now even federal law. And these federal laws put these burdens or put these guidelines in place. And we're just an advisory board. We don't have the power here to be able to make or change the law. We have to work with how the law is already written. And, we do agree with you, sympathize with you. We'd like to have it another way, but we are restricted by how the laws are written as they are, both on the state level and the federal level. If we want less regulation, we would first need to get those laws changed, probably even starting with the federal laws, as those are probably the most restrictive at the moment. All right, any other questions?
So we have two more raised hands and 2 more comments. I'm going to go ahead and unmute April. So if April, if you can go ahead and speak.
Yeah, I just had a quick clarifying question. Hopefully, I had to take a call for a second. So going back to the SB 4 under the Ag Commissioners amendments, the number 4 volunteer plants, I just wanted to hear a clarification on what all that referenced and included.
Well, that's really a topic item. It's something to be addressed on, because the legislation or our state statute doesn't deal with how to address volunteer plants, meaning just plants that come in the next subsequent season naturally and outside of the farming cultivation context. And it's been an issue that was raised by this agricultural commissioner. So we've just identified it and that will potentially be addressed in the legislation.
Great, thank you.
And this is Josh. The next agenda item is a report on the experience from the County Agricultural Commissioners. I'm not sure if Rick was planning on discussing that, but yeah, Patrick is correct that it's plants that come up from the previous season's crop during the next season and how to deal with them. And I don't know if Rick has more information on that during the next agenda item, but if not, we can always come back around to it at the end.
Okay, and then our next hand raised is Melissa Montoya. So Melissa, I've unmuted you. If you can unmute yourself, you can go ahead and speak.
Thank you kindly. I'm glad the gentleman piggybacked off my comment, because it does bring up another point that I was specifically thinking was, as an advisory board, it is, at least to my understanding, specifically under the purview and privilege of an advisory board to advise. And I'd like to see some stronger language in favor of, really common themes that I think everybody kind of can agree on. Advising to have fee waivers, advising to reduce the bureaucracy temporarily, advising to expand potential uses and integration into the food services industry, etc. But as an advisory board, it is not your job to necessarily enforce the law or comply with the law. It is to advise on how those laws should be developed and written and worded, what the language should be, and what the stance of our government should be. And as an advisory board, as that is your role, I'd like to see some very strong language coming from the board about these issues, and not just directed at the state of California, but also the federal government. As an advisory board for the state of California, it is your purview to advise the federal government to, include things like a waiver for disabled people, or, socially disadvantaged single mothers, or whatever. I'm glad that there is some language elsewhere in regards to veterans. Obviously include them too, name them specifically. And you can recommend to Senator Wilk's office that language be included, because you are advising them to do so. And as long as I understand correctly what your role is, that is your role.
Hey, Lawrence, this is Josh. You mind if I take this one real quick?
Yeah.
So just to be clear, so the board's statutory obligation and authority is to advise CDFA on how CDFA and the County Agricultural Commissioners administer and enforce Division 24 of the Food and Agricultural Code. So the board does advise CDFA on how we administer it. They advise us on how we do the work that we do within the scope of the law, but the board unfortunately does not have their job is to advise CDFA, not to advise the legislature or the governor or any other authorities. Now, that doesn't mean that the board can't express their opinions, and certainly that is a valid use of the board's time and valid use of the board's authority. But the board specifically advises CDFA, and I believe we discussed this at previous meetings, but the board may advise CDFA on their recommendations for legislation, but there is no method for CDFA then to advise or direct the legislature to take any action based on that recommendation. So while the board can make their opinions known, and I think Patrick can attest based off his conversations with the legislature, I know that they certainly value the board's opinion. The board cannot direct or advise the legislature directly if that's outside of their authority. So Patrick, I don't know if you had anything else along that topic that you might be able to provide to the public regarding, engaging the legislature and things of that nature.
Yeah, well, I would advise reaching out to Senator Wilk's office and Aguiar Curry's office, as any constituent ought to do. But if the more folks that reach out on issues, they would be listened to by the senator, and certainly you feel free to reach out to the CHC as we continue to do our work, lobbying, and you can always reach out to me individually as well.
All right, do we have any further questions?
We do have two more. So one is just a comment from Cornell Underleader Abrams. There is lobbying being done right now to push the needle to 1%, being pushed forward by Courtney Moran at Earth Law. And then the other is a follow-up from Aaron Gravitz. I work for a testing lab. Should we continue with industrial hemp testing and sampling based on CDFA's current regulations until these proposed rules go into effect?
The answer to that is yes.
And I'll just comment on the 1% and Courtney Moran, that is a noble effort that we support. We think that the 0.3% is, not the right standard and has no basis in science, but the work needs to be done at the federal level to change it.
And then my apologies, we do have one more hand raised, and that's from Taylor Roshan. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you right now. And then Taylor, if you can just unmute yourself. Go ahead, Taylor. Oh, and looks like Taylor. Okay, looks like Taylor doesn't have any comments. So that is it for all of our comments pertaining to this agenda item.
All right, thank you very much. That ends it for agenda number 3. It is 10:44 a.m. Why don't we take a quick 5-minute break? We'll come back at, and I really mean 5, so we'll come back at 10:50 a.m. and begin with agenda item number 4, to report on county experiences on first industrial hemp season. All right, everyone. It's now 10:50. We're back, and hope everyone's took a little break right now, feeling a little bit refreshed. Why don't we go on to item number 4, which will be the report on county experiences in the first industrial hemp season, and that will be led by Rick Garola.
Thanks, Lawrence. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you fine. Thank you, Rick.
Okay. I'm going to preface this with the fact that I did not have a chance to put together a presentation, and I don't know really how I would have done that. I'm trying to wrap my head around the data that I'm going to throw out there, and I'm not going to take an hour. Originally, when I was contacted by CDFA to put something together, we were given a half an hour, and that's what I was working with originally, and we do need to devote some time to the next item regarding seed law, because that is some of the issues that ag commissioners are experiencing now. And then there is a presentation that I don't think was sent out to everybody, but I'm of the understanding that a little video will be shown that was submitted by Lisa Herbert, the agricultural commissioner with Sutter County, who will be the new incoming member on the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board representing ag commissioners. But I need some clarification from CDFA if you guys are going to be able to show that little video clip.
Rick, I can confirm that we will be able to show the video.
Okay. So when I get done with my brief presentation, then we'll show that, and then I'll have Lisa, who's on the line as well. She can be the narrator on that portion of it. So to start with, if you could bring up the slide that says hemp expenditures. So this is information that was provided by CDFA for the report of expenditures and revenues by all counties for fiscal year 18-19. So bear in mind that this captured the data for essentially April, May, and June, just for the last 3 months. So there was not an opportunity for a lot of revenue or reimbursement, but what I'm wanting to capture here and to make the board and public aware of is that cumulatively the county ag commissioners and the county general fund budget had an expenditure in total statewide in the amount of $414,086, and only collected $29,440 in offsetting revenue. If you could go to the slide that states the county report data. So this is a slide that was provided last week by CDFA, and I don't know, someone from CDFA is going to need to weigh in on how current this is. I don't know what the most recent month that would be reflected on this report. If someone could give me that information.
Rick, I can confirm that this information is up to date till February 2020.
Okay. So again, this is a lot to digest as well, and I started highlighting some information. I apologize when I sent this in for display, but I had mentioned in previous meetings that the county rates are going to vary all over the board because of the fact that personnel is paid different rates all over the state for all 58 counties. But what I wanted to point out in this particular, the two counties I highlighted, which is Lake County and Merced County, is showing that's the lowest hourly rate of $39.30, all the way up to Merced County, which is $100.52 per hour. So that total was just simply dividing the total invoiced hours into what the county costs are. So that's intended just to show a reflection how the rates are going to vary, charged by county to county, and also in addition to that, it depends on the counties on what level of staff they have that are doing certain operations. Field staff or field activities are probably assigned to lower level biologists, but as far as doing support activities and programming and everything that we need to do on the federal and state level and interactions with CDFA, as well as attending meetings and answering questions, that's going to be brought up to a higher level, probably to the deputy or the assistant, and probably even in some counties, the agricultural commissioner's level. And if you go to the bottom on the total, and I apologize, I should have highlighted all of those, but what I want everybody to be aware of here is that on the far right side, the last two columns, you can see that the total budget that was submitted to all of the counties from CDFA was $1.6 million. And as of February, since this is the most current, the counties have submitted $930,953. And there's some counties that have not submitted their invoices yet. You can see the counties, not the counties that are blacked out. Those counties chose not to enter into a contract with CDFA for whatever reason. But you'll see counties that do have contracts that have not invoiced any dollars, and that's probably just a reflection of their respective workloads and the inability to get their invoices in. But those are still going to be trickling in as these contracts will go through the end of this fiscal year through the end of June 2020. And I'll come back on that aspect as far as the funding. That'll be some of the concerns that I wanted to address. If you could go to the slide that says Hemp survey. So I'm not going to go through this slide. It would take up the remainder of our time. But what I'm stressing for the advisory board members to do is to read these comments. This was a survey that went out just a little over a week ago to all 58 counties. And please bear in mind that we had the statewide agricultural commissioners and Sealers conference last week. So we were able to get in a real good response rate. We had approximately, well, we had 34 counties that replied to this survey, which is a great response rate of the 58 counties, and especially in fact, in light of the fact that we currently only have 35 counties of the 58 counties that are allowing industrial hemp cultivation activities in their respective counties. So we had a pretty robust response to all of this. But what I'd like all of the members to do, and this needs to be addressed at future meetings, but if you would read the areas that I've highlighted in yellow is what I would like for takeaways for the public, and again for the board members to realize. We don't have the opportunity to know which counties these were answered from. There are some answers that they did list their county name in there, so you will know a few of these. But when we do these surveys, they're done anonymously unless the county chose to identify themselves. So for the roles and responsibilities, the resources needed, those were questions that I had collaborated with CDFA on, and as far as trying to find out, to get some information for the board to digest. The third question that we asked regarding expenses in general fund, that wasn't a very well worded question, because you're going to get to that portion, there's just going to be, I'll wait for right there. There's going to be some counties were putting percentages of general fund, percentages of that they received from the state. Some counties were putting what their expenditures were at a certain point in time. So unfortunately, those responses are going to be meaningless in this aspect. But what needs to be borne in mind is the first two charts I showed as far as the actual expenditures as reported by CDFA that I displayed earlier. The question number 4 about preparing for program staff and responses. I just wanted to find out if there, we knew we were going to need office equipment and everything that's needed to go out in the field, but wanted to find out if there were any specialized items of equipment. There's going to be one county that answered, and I highlighted it, that because of the remoteness of their location, they had to purchase a 4-wheel drive vehicle to access some of the sites to do inspections. But the majority of this is, what I expected to find out was that it's just essentially staff and resources. And it seems to be that most counties had adequate time to prepare for that and to structure their activities and assign their workloads to the staff based on the registrations and the field activities and the sampling and testing oversight, or depending on the county, some counties did oversight, some counties did actual inspections. Going on to questions 5, 6, 7, and 8, all of these are relevant. If you start with question number 5, what were the challenges and obstacles of each activity? Everybody needs to read that and see the challenges that we're encountering in ag commissioners. People need to realize that we are not peace officers, we're public officers, so there's times where counties have actually had to have law enforcement out in the field with them. But these are issues that again, need to be taken to heart and need to be addressed at future meetings. If you go on to question number 6, I'll wait for you to catch up there. So what will be essential for making this season easier and smoother? Great responses here as well. I can't echo enough as far as the public comments about making the program more streamlined and more user-friendly. It would please us greatly to do that as well. A lot of people view this as an agricultural crop, which it is. Unfortunately, there's a criminal and a bad player element of this that's demanding a lot of our time as agricultural commissioners and law enforcement based on some of the activities that I'll bring up here at the end as far as the issues that we're encountering. If you can go on to question 7. Great answers here as well, and the board truly needs to read these responses and agendize what you feel important, but this is what we need from the board as ag commissioners to support the program for what we've been doing now for approximately a year and a half and what we're running across. And then number 8, kind of the same thing. This gets into, pardon the pun, it gets into the weeds as far as what has worked, and it's not all negative comments. We some of this stuff is working, but we do need changes. And this is the real world as far as these comments that you're going to be reading. And again, we would have had a chance to get this out weeks out in advance. We could have got more in depth on this, but this is something that Lisa will be able to address, and I'll be glad to help her on that. So as a takeaway from this, we finally have some really good data to start looking at where we are with the fees that are being collected and the actual expenditures that are being borne by the counties. And what needs to be stressed, and especially in time of budget cuts, and it could be very significant budget cuts from some of these counties, a significant portion of this program is being borne by county respective general funds. And depending on what county you're in and what the respective cuts are, we're not going to be able to put the resources into this program going into the future that we have if it's not funded. One of the big items that we had as far as a reimbursable cost from CDFA and our contract activities were for program support, and that portion is going away on the funding activities. And when you start reading the comments, you're going to see the amount of support it takes for staff to answer questions and assist growers with the registration and with members of the public coming in and asking questions. And that's a big drain on our resources. And if we're not able to get that reimbursed, that aspect's going to go away in some counties, and you're going to see less counties being able to support this. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. As far as the problems that you're going to see when you're reading into the responses, theft is a huge issue in some counties, not all counties, but some counties have had major problems with theft. We have had issues with which is going to be addressed in the next presentation with seed varieties and seeds that's being sold as a highly percentile portion of feminized seed. when in reality, as we're out in the field and the growers, they're buying something that's supposed to be 95 or higher % feminized seed, and they're getting a germination rate of 50 or 60% female plants. It's causing issues, as well as germination in the seed. When seed claims that it's going to be a certain percentage germination rate, people are paying very, very large amounts of dollars per seed on this crop, and it's not meeting that germination percentage. It's creating problems. Destruction has become well, it hasn't become. We expected that to be an issue, and I know that there's some proposed law changes that will certainly help lessen this as far as if they're able to be disposed and utilized. But right now, the law says destruction means, or destroy means, it has to be destroyed. The crops that are actually testing hot and have been destroyed in counties, I haven't heard of any problems. There could be some in the responses when you read that, but I have heard from counties that hot crops have magically disappeared or have been stolen. And that's going to create problems. Again, this gets into the bad players in the field, and it creates issues with boards of supervisors wanting to support these programs when people are trying to follow the rules, but because people aren't following the rules, it's creating problems and taking resources away from not only our departments, but law enforcement as well. Another issue that Ag Commissioner in Riverside County has conveyed, and it might be in other counties as well, is they had a large number of registered growers that for industrial hemp, and I don't know where they were in the process of testing as far as the THC, but those crops were harvested and they were actually cannabis marijuana plants, and there was no way to go back in and to take any action on that. But that's an issue, a big issue they've been having down in Riverside County this year. We need to address the testing requirements for counties that are allowing nursery plants and microgreens as far as how we're going to test those plants, or do we even need to test those plants? Because they're not growing to maturity. But we need to get answers on that, because those are real issues that we're dealing with. It was mentioned about the volunteer plants, and I believe that Lisa has a slide with that, but that is something that is real and it's happening. And we need the ability on how we can address when there are volunteer plants and we don't have any regulatory authority to have the grower or the owner of that field now that the land may have been leased, and they have to deal with having to abate somehow the volunteer plants. As far as pollen drift, someone brought that up earlier as well. That is not something that we have addressed. I know that I believe Sonoma County has a local ordinance that's specifically addressing pollen drift, and that's because they have a very robust cannabis industry. There may be other counties that have addressed that in local ordinances, but that's something that the advisory board may want to take up to see if there's any recommendations, and if not, then it can be handled at a local county level. And then local fee payments, and Lisa is going to touch on this because she's one of the counties that have been damaged by this. And what I'm talking about here is when we collect the registration fee at the time of registration, but as far as our field activities for counties that have approved fee schedules, we need cost recovery on that to reimburse us for our actual time out in the field. And when there's been a very large percentage of counties that have submitted the bills for their time out to observe the testing or actually do the testing and verify the signage is out there, and for other activities as well. And those bills aren't getting paid, and it's creating a problem as well. So with that, I will back off. If you want to do the question portion now, or if you want to wait until we show the little video that it's a very short video, just a couple minutes long, that Lisa had submitted and addressed questions at that time. Whatever you want to do, Lawrence.
All right, why don't we go for questions right now while your presentation is fresh in our heads? And I actually had one. First of all, thank you, Rick. That was a great presentation. And it's really important that we know what is happening on the ground and the real life experiences of regulating or growing hemp. you had mentioned you had a number of recommendations. Do you think these recommendations are more for changes in the law, changes or regulations from the advisory board, or just trying to work out better procedures with the Department of Agriculture?
Well, first off, it's with being a new program, there were some hurdles and obstacles, and we've got a great relationship with CDFA, but it's a brand new program, and we've joked, we're essentially, the cannabis industry was building the plane as it was being flown, and we joke that we're building the boat as it's floating. So I think CDFA has been a great partner for us, but with the fact of counties trying to harmonize with state and the state trying to harmonize with the feds, and it's just been, in emergency regulations, it's been a nightmare for county staff. So we're seeing light on the end of the tunnel. But the other portion of your question about laws or reg changes, it depends on what that particular change was, if it's a current law or if it's a regulation that may need to be amended, or in the case of dealing with to pick on something such as the volunteer plants. Is that something that we can do through the regulatory process, through the rulemaking process, or is that something that would be a law that we would need? So it could be a variety of all of the above.
All right, thank you, Rick. Does anyone else on the advisory board have a question for Rick regarding the county's experiences? All right, nobody. Then why don't we open it up to the public? And I want to reiterate that please, on your questions, please make it a question that we can answer, and then please keep it to the topic of the experiences on the ground with each county.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and start with the hand raise. So we have Wayne Richmond. So Wayne, I went ahead and unmuted you. If you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay. It seems that Wayne is a little bit idle right now, so we'll come back to him if necessary. So the next person is Victor Barrium. So Victor, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi, I wanted to make more of a comment and suggestion. It's not a question. Going back to all the issues that are being created, kind of creation of black market due to hemp and hot crops. Talking to a lot of farmers throughout the country, not just here in California, one of the biggest issues is the seeds and them going hot or them letting it run too long before they cut it down. I would highly suggest coming up with a really good remediation way of doing it instead of just destroying everybody's crop, because that is what's going to create the black market. If a farmer has hundreds of thousands of dollars into their fields and they're over by 0.03%, or it's 0.3% total, but they're over by just the threshold, you're going to destroy hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of product that they can just say got stolen and then sell into the black market. So I think that's really where the main issue is, the remediation. These farmers wouldn't have to do anything like that. Not saying that they are, but that's kind of what I've get from the industry, is if they are able to remediate and really recoup some of that loss, they wouldn't have to go into the black market.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments?
So our next commenter is Marcelo Mota. So Marcelo, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
This is Mr. Mota from Loving Valley Farms in Tulare County. I would really want to thank Rick for bringing up what he presented here on the accounting and just the visibility that the counties are overburdened already, and in these very deep agriculture places will have very little income generation, and another potential source could be pro-hemp, is that we're just putting a burden not only on the hemp industry of being birthed, but we're putting on a burden on the counties. And this approach it's like this book I'm reading right here by Roger Norse in dollar bill italics, Dead on Arrival. And that's where we're really heading to, where the state should be having one central department, not dispersing and diluting the funds and support among all the counties that are very poor. And the greatest counties that with the greatest income, like LA, Santa Clara, and San Francisco, they don't grow agriculture. They could support that, but they're on a different path with programming. And it's my recommendation, and you're an advisory board, and you have to advocate what we're saying and pass it up the channel, that with this deep, financial burden, we cannot make law enforcement into an agriculture police. Just like we can't make law enforcement into a psychological police to help all mental health. So we already know the lessons. We already know that. You're all educated people. We need to reboot this and send it back up to Sacramento, to CDFA, whatever department you have up there, and have it centrally located with one large staff instead of diluting it into 58 counties. And before this becomes, it doesn't work out. I don't want to use any strong words because it's going to be a lost opportunity, because we got to remember, we're trying to rebirth a new industry that is not only an agriculture, but it makes hemp concrete, it makes panels for BMW vehicles, it makes oils, it makes hempcrete, and hundreds of other items we're going to throw away in an anti-pro business, if that's what you could advocate for up there in CDFE, that we're really teeter-tottering, because if you don't have the money, you can't launch anything. And I want to thank Rick for clearly putting a microscopic lens on it and showing what everyone is already saying here and recommended that everyone should read here. So I recommend that we need to have our radar on and advocate for us, and ask that the CDFF put a compass on this and re-navigate completely around this mess that Rick showed is an iceberg in the way. And this is a ship heading for it. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your comment. Any other comments or questions?
And then we did have two written comments. One from Melissa Montoya. 400,000 is a negligible for the state of California, but not for a person. And then the other is from Ed Williams. His question is, would volunteer plants fall under unapproved cultivar?
So Ed, for everybody's information, Ed Williams is the Ag Commissioner and Agricultural Commissioner in Ventura County. I'm going to defer that question to CDFA. We think it is, but that's why we need clarification.
This is Josh. I'll echo what Rick said. Yeah, we agree, and as that issue comes up, we work directly with the county ag commissioners. But that's why the commissioners brought that to the attention of the California Hemp Council as they move forward, trying to sponsor some legislation to get clarity on how to deal with that situation and how best to enforce it. Thanks.
All right. Are there more questions being asked?
We do not have any more comments or any raised hands.
All right, great. So that will end topic number 4, and we thank you very much, Rick. A lot to think about.
Lawrence, this is Josh. So, yeah, you've got a video, and then I believe Lisa Herbert, who's the ag commissioner from, I believe, Sutter County, was also going to comment on the video as well.
Okay, that's right. We have that video.
Before you wrap it up.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so let's go for the video.
Hi, this is Lisa Herbert. I'll allow the video to be shown, and then maybe we could talk about it. That concludes the video. So let me introduce myself. I'm Lisa Herbert, the Sutter County Ag Commissioner. I started my career 22 years ago here in Sutter County and was appointed Ag Commissioner in 2016 and was recently reappointed. I want to thank Rick Garola for representing the State California Ag Commissioner Association for the last 3 years. He represented us very well, and you know, he did an excellent job. And he's on to bigger and better things that he probably won't tell you about. But he is our association's president-elect, and we're really proud of him for that. So I'm just waiting. I've submitted my application and waiting for secretarial appointment to be on the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board. This video I put together very quickly in about 5 minutes, just as a draft to ask Rick if he thought we could show it, and it worked out. So that's what you're seeing now. It is mostly Sutter County and some of Kings County's pictures. As you can tell, there's a lot of different variety, as some of you in the hemp industry know, some autoflowers that look, in my opinion, terrible, very sparsely grown. The buds were not very big. There were some, you know, great variety in size. You know, that attributes to the seed issues that we've been talking about. This last little clip of a male here obviously is a big problem. We had some of our hemp growers in Sutter County rogue fields 10 times for males and eventually had to give up. So the crop seeded. So, you know, as Rick explained, there are many different issues coming out of the local counties with industrial hemp. My county was one of the first to open. We have no land use restrictions at this time, so we've been fair game since May of 2019. I had about 820 acres planted. I probably had a couple of thousand registered, but about 820 was actually planted. I've expended a minimum of 900 hours of staff time on those 820 acres. Some of the numbers that Rick showed you were just for the industrial hemp program. There is also a pesticide use component hours that are not attributed in that we do not bill for. So there's a significant amount of time getting our growers operator IDs. So it's just another component. So a couple of things I want to talk about as that I have found issues. Voluntary destruction is an issue. I had one grower that did not sample and wanted to voluntarily destruct. I have no enforcement authority, and it just sat. And I believe it may still be sitting in the same spot. Luckily, it was only 1 acre and it was in his front yard, so I wasn't really that concerned about it. Another issue, obviously, was with the newly developed background checks. That was quite cumbersome, especially during COVID-19, when there was a time frame to get the background checks completed. Most of the live scan areas were closed. All of law enforcement offices were closed and not doing live scans at that time. So we're still vetting through that process. Staff is now a little bit uncomfortable that they are receiving the FBI background checks and noting some disturbing backgrounds of some of the key participants, and it's making them a little uncomfortable. They may not be drug-related charges, but they may be other charges that now my staff is aware when they're dealing with those key participants. So Sutter County did destroy industrial hemp last year. So the one slide that had where it looked like it was mowed down, that was actually seed crop, and it did turn up high for THC at 3.4449%. That was flail mowed and disked, and it was obviously immediately gone. So you can tell we were there right at the same time, and that was a picture just showing that flail mowing and disking did work for destruction on that parcel. We did have another parcel that was 80 acres, and the first test was 0.56%, and the second test came back at 0.59%. So that field had to be destroyed. It was in a very remote location, and probably some of the plants also disappeared, as Rick was indicating. So that was quite upsetting. As an ag commissioner, it's not typically our role to destroy crops, and 80 acres was substantial. Another issue that Rick was talking about was the financials, just to give you an indication of how it's affecting my department specifically. So we have billed for our sampling and testing and harvest, verification for harvest. We have only received 35% of those invoices. The rest will be going to collections. So that is really poor return rate when we're billing the key participants, or the businesses. So if we cannot recover that money for our time and mileage, then it's just not good business. Also, we have billed out to CDFA about $26,000, and we've yet to recover our costs for that, although we've submitted our invoices and we do anticipate recovering that. So to date, just in my county, I'm just a little shy of in the hole of $40,000. So we are not in the business to do a gift of public funds, as you say, and this needs to be a full cost recovery program. The state of affairs in Sutter County at this time, going into the 2021 budget cycle, early on in February, I was asked to cut about $67,000 out of my salaries and benefits, which I was able to do. And then last week, I was asked to cut an additional $87,500 due to COVID-19 shortages. So as you can imagine, just going into 2021, I've already been asked to cut about $155,000 out of my budget, and I am short almost $40,000 in cost recovery for industrial hemp at this time. So I cannot sustain a program with those ratios. So that's just to give you an idea. And that is about all. Oh, the other thing I wanted to cover that I don't know if it's been brought up, Rick's county was not active in industrial hemp as mine was, but we now have requested crop report information. So ag commissioners are required by law to submit an annual crop report to the Secretary of Food and Ag. So in the 2019 growth season, we actually submitted crop report surveys to industrial hemp growers to get some feedback so we can report that data in our crop report this for 2020, reflecting the 2019 year. So just as a request to the industry to be mindful, that is proprietary information. We do not give out that information to anybody. Once the crop report is published, we do shred the material. So it is proprietary. We do not disclose that information. So we, as county ag commissioners that grew in 2019, need that data so that we can report to the secretary, who then reports to the National Ag Statistics. Thank you, and that's all I have if anybody has any questions.
All right. Anyone on the board have any questions for Lisa?
I have a question.
Yes.
That was really, really enlightening. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. I'm curious if you think costs are going to change in the future as the farmers get more used to the process, and your staff has done it multiple times. I'm just trying to think, as we're going to be talking about fees at some point in the future, will you expect your costs to change, or do you think it's going to be sort of what it is now?
I would expect our costs to go up because we only build direct hours. So all of my time, my manager's times, all the time I spent meeting with hemp growers directly or discussing with my board of supervisors, my county administrator, I gave probably 6 or 8 tours last year to different industries, California ag, all sorts of people, sorry, I can't think. Assemblyman Gallagher came out. I gave multiple tours, including CDFA staff came out and actually did hemp sampling in my county. So we did not claim those hours. So those hours were in addition to the hours I reported to you. So no, I do not anticipate costs going down. Actually, costs may go up as our rates change. We have to do a rate study every year or every other year with the auditor's office, and those rates may go up.
Thanks.
All right, Lisa, I had a question for you. You had mentioned about some of the crops had to be destroyed, and you said something about using a mower. Would you elaborate a little bit more on that process and what happens to the leftover hemp that's on the ground?
Yeah, so in the one case that I was able to witness, just the very small plot of seed, they used a flail mower, so just a mower behind a tractor, and then they went back over it and disked the actual organic material into the soil. So when we went out, there were some woody stems still available, but for the most part, everything that we saw was not a red flag that it would not be incorporated back into the soil, right? It didn't feel like somebody would come out and steal whatever bud was left. It seemed to incorporate in the soil very nicely.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Anyone else on the board have a question? No. All right. Do we have anyone in the general audience with any questions?
We only have one raised hand. That is from Wayne Richmond. So I'll go ahead and unmute you, Wayne, and if you can also unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you for the report, Lisa. That's great. I look forward to your service on the board. And Rick, thank you for all the work you've done. I was just curious, was any of this registered crops that you've reported on of the fiber variety, or was it all exclusively CBD varieties?
Well, Wayne, this is Rick. I don't have that information that wasn't reported. I don't believe the registrations are quantifying that any longer, but I know that that was something I was going to leave the board with as an additional recommendation, was to advocate for some type of processing facilities so that there will be other markets for industrial hemp. Currently, I personally am not aware, and if you are aware, please share that information of any processing facility for those types of plants being grown, because we do need to get that information out to growers. And I know that's something that Lisa and I actually were part of the group that went back to Washington, D.C. and met with USDA and our legislators back there and advocated for funding and for grant opportunities for California agriculture so we can help expand these markets. So that's something that is greatly lacking that needs to be brought to the forefront. But Lisa, maybe you have some additional information about those varieties.
Okay. Well, Rick, thank you for mentioning that. I was part of a group that went back to Washington, D.C. in January. We actually had a great meeting with USDA as well, and got the DEA lab and margins of errors introduced as concepts to work on. Okay, so I agree. I'll reach out to you, Rick, separately. We do have a proposal on the table for a stimulus package for hemp supply, so and one for the state. So we're about to present that, and I'd love your feedback. Anyway, that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Hi, this is Lisa Herbert again. I was muted. All of the varieties in Sutter County were either grown for seed crop or CBD. The other thing I forgot to mention was the theft. So and you have a sheriff sitting on the board, maybe he could attest to that better, but there was lots and lots of industrial hemp theft in Sutter County, including a shooting. So that is very troublesome as well.
Oh, thank you.
And then I had Ed Williams. Go ahead, Ed, I've unmuted you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
In Ventura County, I was just.
We're having difficulties hearing you, Ed.
Okay. Can you just read my my message?
Of course. I'll go ahead and just read Ed's comment then. His comment is that all CBD and smokables in Ventura, and then there's some seed production. And this is an answer to Wayne's question.
Thanks.
And then we have one last hand raised, and that's from Melissa Montoya. Go ahead, Melissa. And if you can just unmute yourself.
Sorry, yeah. So I'm really interested in speaking with other people that have been involved in this discussion, and I created a little group on Facebook, Industrial Hemp Group. Find me so we can keep talking.
Oh, Melissa, we have some difficulties hearing you. So if you can just write your comments, and then we'll read it later as well, or if you can type it in now. And then we have one last hand raised, and that's from Wayne Richmond. Go ahead, Wayne, if you can just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Actually, no, Ed, I think I got my answers. Thank you. And thanks to Ed for following up.
Okay. And we have no more comments.
All right, very good. So I believe we're out of topic number 4, report of the county experiences, and we thank everyone who testified today. And we move on to agenda item number 5, which is the review of application of seed law to industrial hemp. And we will be having a discussion led by Brenda Lanini.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes,
wow.
we hear you.
Okay. Seed law is very dense, and so I'm going to try to bring the parts that apply to hemp forward. I'm not trying to minimize other parts of the law, and I am more than willing to talk about them. It's just that we need to kind of concentrate on the parts that we've been noticing people are having issues with. Could you change the slide, Shadi? So when we talk about seed law and regulations, we're talking about the Federal Seed Act, the regulations that go with the Federal Seed Act, California seed law, and the code of regulations that go with California seed law. In California, we attempt to conform as much as possible with federal seed law, but it is not exactly the same. This is my favorite part out of California Food and Ag Code. This is kind of the mantra I'm trying to get all of my group to look at, is that our job is to help the seed industry to ensure that the seed purchased by the consumer, this could be a grower, this could be a dealer, is properly identified and of the quality and the amount represented on the tag or label, which means everybody needs to follow the same rules on the tags and labels. Shadi? So in the state of California, all seed sellers and labelers must register. We actually register seed sellers, but a labeler has sold, so they also have to register or they won't be on our website. There are a few caveats for this. Growers that sell to neighbors, persons that are, a seed company that's doing a seed increase is not specifically selling that seed. Maybe they're going to take it back to Georgia and they wouldn't have to register with us. And if a company already has a nursery stock license, for instance, a Home Depot, they also do not register with us. Slide. So this is our application. We have a copy online, but it actually has to be printed off, typed in, and mailed because we do not have a way for you to pay us with an online method. We take checks. This is the application. We take, I don't know, a little over 600 every year. You can see on the application, we divide seed into lawn seed, ag seed, which would include hemp and vegetable seed. Our fiscal year is when we do it, so everyone will be applying July 1st through July 31st, and they we go by the date on the postmark, so we know whether someone's late or not. Fine. So this is a copy right off of we posted on the website. These are firms that are registered to sell seed in California. We update this. It varies. Sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's every week or two. It depends on how often people have been applying. We last did this, I believe, a month ago. And all we put up is the firm's name and the address, the headquarter address. So we don't put, if someone has 6 locations, those are not listed on this website. Next screen. So you're a labeler if basically you put your name on that package of seed, and then you are selling it within the state. When we say labeling, by law, we mean the label, an invoice. If you do advertisement that's handed out with that seed, all of that is considered to be part of the label, which could be really important to people who are not putting feminized on the label, but are putting it on the advertisement, for instance. We do not allow false advertising. Next slide. So this is the law, and this is the regulation that goes with it. Basically, at the present time, a labeler of seed in the state of California is paying 30 cents for every $100 of gross sales. It's very dense. You're welcome to read it later, but that's what it is. Next slide. Agricultural seed is any grass, cereal, legume, fiber crop, mixtures of seeds, so pasture mix, stuff you put out on your golf courses, all of that falls under agricultural seed. It's not just the corn and the wheat that we normally think of. Industrial hemp was added to the schedule of agricultural seeds in the Code of Regulations on March 19th, so it is now covered by seed law as of March 19th. Next slide. So this is a sample. I made up all these titles, they're not real, of a label, and this is what we would like it to look like. It needs to say the type, the kind of seed. Industrial hemp works and hemp works. We put both of them in seed law. It needs, in this case, for agricultural crops, variety is not required. However, because you cannot plant seed in the state of California unless you know the variety name, of course, people would want to do the variety on their labels, as well as provide a certificate for the THC from the lab, even though that is not required on the label. It needs to have a lot number that is specific to the seed. If you have a giant lot of seed and you have done something that would change it, sorted small seeds from large seeds, for instance, the lot number would change and all the information below would change. So it's very important that a lot is a distinct amount of seed. The percent pure seed must be on an agricultural seed label, the percent of weed seed, and I have a little more information on that later. If you have other crops, if somehow some wheat got in there, you should have that on the label. Inert matter, if you have a lot of chaff in there, you need to tell people how much you have. If you have put a seed coating on there, you would need to tell people. The general rule of thumb is that all your numbers should add to 100%. We can't have more than 100% in a bag. Noxious weed seeds, and I'm going to go into this later, but if there are any present, they must be on the label. The germination of the seed must be on the label, and the month and year it was tested in. And the labeler's name and their address must be on the label. Next slide. So here's the law behind it. If you see number 1 is the kind and variety, or kind and type. For hemp, it's just basically kind and variety. And the lot number, slide. Then when you do weed seeds, it's percentage by weight of all weed seeds found in it. And if there is a restricted noxious weed seed, we want to know how many seeds there are per pound. The county where that seed is going to be sold might say that they don't allow that noxious weed seed. So it's very important that that's in there. The percent by weight of any agricultural seed that is not listed on the label, for instance, wheat and hemp. percent of inert matter. And then if you were, and this doesn't, the next sentence doesn't really apply for pasture mix or other mixes, you need to put the percent of all the different varieties making up it. And I just don't see people mixing hemp into blends right now. And of course, the name and address of the person who labeled the seed or the person who sells the seed. Next slide. So for weed seeds, there are a few caveats. Most agricultural crops would be listed under crops, not under weeds. But if you go to section 3901, there is a list of some weeds, some mustards and a few others, some grasses, that if they are found in an agricultural seed and not listed on the label, they are defined to be weeds. You can see that you probably don't want a bunch of grass growing up in your hemp field. Schedule 3899 is the schedule of agricultural crops. Prohibited noxious weed seed, we have those are listed directly in the Code of Regulations. Those are really not allowed in seed at all. We have talked to, we will allow a company to reclaim the seed when we find it in there, but pretty much if you have that prohibited noxious weed seed, it is not to be planted in California. Restricted noxious weed seeds, it depends on the tolerance for that seed. Some are allowed, like I said, a county might say that's not a problem in our county and another county might have a problem. Could be a seed that is only found in a wet places and you're planting, for instance, in a dry place. So that is something to check with. If the seed has restricted noxious weed seeds, you should know who you're planting with and talk to seed services or to your county ag commissioner. Next slide. Treated seed, this is from California Code. It is also covered, of course, in federal law as well as for the Department of Pesticide Regulation. Basically, if you have treated the seed, you need to state it on the label. You need to state the chemical, you need to state the warning statement that applies to it. It needs to be on the label. You can't say, well, I thought it was okay. Needs to be there. Next statement, slide. Violations, germination must be done within a certain period of time. If you are selling it to a dealer, you have to have ran that test within the last 8 months. If you are doing it at retail, that test must to have been done within the last 15 months. Otherwise, the seed is in violation and cannot be sold. Next slide. We have lots of violations. Any seed that is not properly labeled is in violation. If it has prohibited noxious weed seeds, again, it's in violation. And then this is the one about false or misleading labeling or false or misleading advertising. You can't put one thing on the label and something else on the invoice or in a sales advertisement. That is considered to be false and misleading. You cannot say it's certified seed or registered seed unless it's actually been certified by a seed certifying agency. This is where the word certified can get a little confusing. Something that is certified with a lab result is not certified seed. It just has a lab result. And so people need to be really careful that you're not misusing that term when it comes to seed. When it comes to seed, certified seed is a very specific word used only when something has been certified by a seed certifying agency and it's followed all sorts of very rigid rules. For instance, the California Crop Improvement Association would be a certifying agency. If your weed seed exceeds 1.5%, then you are also in violation. It is required to be on the label, but you may not have any weeds at a higher level than that. And then there are, in some instances, not yet in hemp, where a variety may only be sold as certified because it's been determined that way by the owner of the variety. This is not something that's happened in hemp yet, but as people go down the road of breeding their own varieties, this may crop up. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Next slide. According to California law, you must have a mediation statement on your packet of seed that is for farm use. And of course, hemp by rule is for farm use. We're not allowed to have it growing in our backyard. And this is the statement you must have. It doesn't say a mediation type of statement. This is what you must have on there, the mediation notice. It is actually in seed law, and you could just copy it out. Next one. We have a procedure in regulation for how to do a mediation. The thing that is important for people to realize is if you have a problem, it's always great to talk to your county ag commissioner. And then to file a problem, it must be written. You must have your name, address, and phone number on it. You have to say what your complaint is and what you believe caused it. And then you have to provide evidence of the purchase and a copy of the label of the seed that planted the crop you are complaining about. If you don't have that, it is very hard for anyone to know that you really bought the seed. You have to give an accurate and complete directions to locate the affected crop. It has to be looked at and evaluated, usually by CDFA and the county in combination. Do not destroy the crop. If the crop is destroyed, there cannot be a seed complaint because it can't be evaluated. You are also required to give a complete copy of your complaint to the company, the dealer, whoever the seed was purchased from, whoever you're complaining about by certified or registered mail. And we won't start the process until you pay a fee of $250 when you're filing your complaint. You must maintain the crop until it's released so that it can be evaluated. You can talk to the secretary. If you have 500 acres and it's all the same and we agree it's all the same, then we may allow you to maintain only a partial part of the crop. But that has to be discussed. You can't just disc 400 acres and say that it was all the same. So the thing here is let's all communicate and go forward if there's a complaint and make sure that it's above board and done correctly. Next slide. So this is my takeaway for you. You need to register to sell seed. It's not a complicated process. We're more than willing to help through it. Label containers correctly. The grower needs to know what he's getting. It helps get rid of a lot of misunderstanding if it's all written down correctly. And for both parties, whether you're a seller or grower, you should maintain paperwork. The Federal Seed Act has a huge list of paperwork required, and since a lot of seed is crossing borders, state borders, it falls under the Federal Seed Act, and it would need to follow those rules. But at a minimum, you need invoices, copies of labels, containers, shipping dockets, lab results. Most seed companies keep track of how they treated the seed, how they sorted the seed, the different number of containers it was in. These are all important paperwork should there ever be a seed complaint. Otherwise, it's very difficult to research. And then we also have an advisory board. The Seed Advisory Board has 11 members. They are members of 2 members of the public, and the rest are representatives of the seed industry, sellers, as well as labelers. And you, of course, are more than welcome to attend our board meetings. We just had one a few weeks ago. Next slide. So this is us. If you send an email with a question, there are multiple people that answer this email, and you will get an answer very, very quickly. You may phone the main line, but with all of us teleworking and stuff right now, we will try to get you an answer very quickly, but it is definitely going to be a slower one, maybe a day or 2. And then on our website, we have a book that's got California seed law and regulations in it. We have a pamphlet about what you need to know to sell seed. We have a pamphlet about if you're a grower, to knowing what you sow, the things to look for on seed labels, so that you can kind of keep an idea of what are you getting sold and is it really what you should be getting? And so I encourage you, please contact us, call us. Let's get things, open and above board and make sure everybody's going down the same road together, because our job is actually more an idea of getting a fair marketplace and keeping everybody legal and above board so that we're all doing a good job in industry and for the agricultural community. I think that's the last slide.
Hey, Brenda, this is Josh. Do you mind if I add a couple quick notes? I made a couple notes as you were going through on things that I wanted to add a little bit of extra information. So first off, I did want to thank Brenda. So Brenda is our state seed control official. Brenda is Michelle's counterpart for our seed services program. She's the board manager of the seed board. So I appreciate all the work she's doing in presenting this. If you have seed questions, she is the statewide expert and is the one to seek out the information from. While you have this slide up, I did just want to note for the public, I know that's a long email address. If you just send something to seed services, all one word, at cdfa.ca.gov, it will go to that email address. The response you see will come from the one that you see on the screen there, but if you just send something to seed services at cdfa.ca.gov, it should work just fine and should get to all of the seed services staff. And then just a couple of quick things. So Brenda mentioned the department adding hemp to the list of agricultural seeds in California. We've mentioned this at previous board meetings, but hemp has been in the Federal Seed Act for many years. And so any shipment of hemp seed going across state lines is subject to and has been subject to Federal Seed Act requirements for quite a long time. And so our staff do coordinate with USDA in enforcement of the Federal Seed Act for state that's crossing state lines, so that the Federal Seed Act would otherwise apply. And so we want to make sure that people are aware of those requirements. And I just wanted a quick note that there were a lot of labeling requirements on there, and it seems like a lot to go through, but those are the same labeling requirements done for all ag crops. And so for anybody who's interested, if you go to any store that sells agricultural seeds, whether those are grass seeds or otherwise, those same label requirements are on, or should be on, every bag of seed that you see. And so these are kind of common practices within the agricultural industry. And as we continue to seek to apply things that apply to ag crops to hemp, this is one of them that's a basic component of agricultural production in the United States, and that is done not just in California, but every state. And so, again, as Brenda said, I would reiterate, please visit the website. There's a lot of really good information on there. And please reach out to staff if there are any questions, or reach out to your local county ag commissioners. That was all. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Brenda. I had two quick questions. If people in California are buying seed from out of state, does it have to follow the California rules, or does it follow the federal rules?
When you say for out of state, if you are ordering seed while sitting in California and they're shipping it to you, it's technically being bought in California, and it has to follow California and federal rules.
Okay, and then what about the reverse of that? If somebody was in California and then shipping out of state?
It would follow federal rules and the rules of the state where it's going.
Okay, great.
Most states try to follow a similar set of rules, but it does vary a little bit.
All right. And another question, I have read newspaper articles about people having problems with seeds, hemp seeds in California. Has your office had to deal with anything so far?
We've had a lot of questions about sales. We have had a lot, we've had to deal with some. We haven't had any seed complaints yet because the seed planted was actually not under code at the time it was planted. But if it has crossed federal lines to get here, we would help them with that.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else on the board have any questions for Brenda? All right. Anyone in the general public have any questions for Brenda regarding the application of seed law and industrial hemp?
We only have one comment, Lawrence, and that's from Melissa. Melissa, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now. If you can go ahead and speak. And if you can just unmute yourself as well. It looks like Melissa is not responding. So I'll go ahead and mute her, and we don't have any other comments.
All right, thank you very much. If there aren't any other questions, then we'll go to item number 6, which will be additional public comments. So does anyone, I would say, does anyone on the board have any additional public comments regarding any items that were or were not discussed at today's meeting? All right, nope. So we'd like to say, were there any public comments on matters of industrial hemp in California that were not discussed at today's meeting?
Yes, we do have, Lawrence. So we have Justin Eve who has submitted some questions to us. So it's a 3-part question. So first is, can the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board pass a motion that staff shall work with the board or the committee to review all proposed rules for presentation to the board for their consideration and recommendation to the secretary prior to the submission to OAL? The second question is that the board understands that some rulemaking need to take place under emergency exemption. However, the latest rulemaking is going back to circumstances in fall 2018 and spring 2019 to justify the emergency adoption of sampling regulations. And an emergency doesn't last for years. We need to do the work to make this right, not adopt rules in a vacuum. When will emergency status cease? And his final is, when will the board be able to provide comment to the emergency rules currently in place? E.g., when will the emergency end and normal adoption of these rules take place?
And I think that's more of a Joshua question.
Sure. So as far as the sampling, testing, et cetera, regulations, those are currently out for public comment. Once that comment period ends, we will move forward with trying to certify those regulations in accordance with the Administrative Procedure Act. However, at that point, once they're adopted, regulations are made to be changed. And so the board, the intent is to have an ongoing conversation with the board to continue to adjust and amend regulations as we move forward to try to make everything be, administrable and effective, while still being responsive to changes to state and federal laws and regulations. As far as the recent emergency regulations that were recently passed, sections 4901 and 4902, those we have not started the process for regular rulemaking yet. And so if there is an interest from the board in engaging further discussion at a meeting prior to proposing that regular rulemaking, that is certainly something that we can be open to. We would have to consult with our, internally at CDFA to make sure that that's something that we would want to do as a board meeting rather than just as a general public scoping meeting. But I suspect that as a board meeting, that would probably be fine. But that is certainly something that we can work with the board on as far as commenting on that and potentially recommending changes to that regulation prior to proceeding with making that regulation permanent. But again, with the other regulations or with any other regulations that we've proposed and have worked on, as long as we're outside of that formal rulemaking process, those regulations are certainly open for discussion by the board, and we can meet and discuss those and take additional public comments at that time as well. So hopefully that answers the question.
All right, thank you, Joshua. Any other public questions at this point? Comments?
So we have multiple from Wayne Richmond. So I'm going to go ahead and read it. Will the board resolve to have these meetings every 30 days until there is no more business to attend to? The public notice for the board meetings are not less than 30 days from the date of any scheduled meeting. And then finally, and this is a long comment, and the board shouldn't adjourn until it has set a time frame date for their next meeting. Maybe set a meeting for the late June, early July to seat the new board, elect the chair and vice chair, and appoint the chair and vice chair of the committee. Then set dates for the committees to meet and get to work. The new board should also map out of the year to align with when committees would work and then full board meetings to meet deadlines for budget approval or get regulations into OAL process.
All right, yeah, thank you, Wayne. Just kind of what Wayne was going on, do we have a date when the new board is going to be announced?
So this is Josh. So at this point, no, the package is being routed. The appointments have not yet been made. They will be made soon. We're actively working on that. So no, we don't have a date specifically for the board to be announced, but that's basically as soon as the secretary is able to review and appoint members. And so that should be fairly soon. Certainly would be before the next board meeting.
All right, and in regards to that, would the next board meeting be scheduled now by us, or would we have to wait until the next board is actually announced?
That's up to you all. You guys can set the next meeting date now if you would like. Once you're done with public comments, that's the next agenda item, so feel free.
All right. Anyone else on the board want to try to answer Wayne, or do we have anyone else with any public questions or comments?
And then a follow-up from Wayne, he just wants to state that set it now for as early as practical.
All right.
Thank you,
Any
Locke.
other?
So, yeah, Locke and Maria, any other questions or comments
Yes.
from the public?
We do. So from Melissa Montoya, she wanted to finish off her comments that she made since her audio kind of broke apart. She just want to make sure that let everyone know to continue the conversation on Facebook at Industrial Hemp Group. And then Mr. Marcelo Mota said to all the board members, what are your reflections on today's meeting?
All right, well, you want to answer, and I would say one thing, we managed to get the meeting done probably about the fastest we've ever done it. We're almost right on time, so I'm proud of that. Certainly really good information from the county agricultural commissioners, and hopefully we can consider that in next meetings, and even more so be able to get laws changed to lighten the load or lighten the burden, both for the federal or for the state employees and for the farmers and businesses growing hemp. That would be all of my comments on it. If anyone else on the board wants to make a comment about today's meeting. Nope. All right. Any other public comments?
Heather Hughes, she did have a question related to the selection process for the board members, but it has been answered. And she wants to put a comment that she wants to sincerely thank Rick for addressing the need for hemp processing for fiber crops and recognizing the need for farmers to have some other reason to plant profit from planting this crop. We don't have any other comments.
All right, it's Maria. Thank you, Maria. All right, so why don't we move forward to the last item agenda, and that is actually our next meeting and other next agenda items that we'd like to talk about. So I think there's a few things there, but I'll let the board speak first. Anyone on the board have an agenda item they'd like to put on the next meeting? Okay, no one right now has any agenda item. I would recommend it if anyone, whether it's a member of the public or the staff of the CDFA or people on the board, if you do have agenda items in the next few weeks or whatever, definitely email me about that. And my information is on the CDFA webpage, and then we can certainly try to get those items on the board on as an agenda item for the next board meeting.
Lawrence,
Does anyone have a yeah.
Yeah, so real quick, so I mean, as far as the next meeting agenda items, the only thing that I was catching that was on the list from the discussion today, so I know at the previous meeting there was a conversation about reviewing the fees and the expenses and trying to come up with a new fee schedule. And I know that I believe it was Matt and Josh Chase were going to look into that further. So giving them an opportunity to review that with program staff and the data that Rick and the program were able to come up with, that would probably be a topic for the next board meeting.
Matt, are you still with us? Would that be an appropriate topic for you to be able to talk about?
Yeah, I think that would be applicable. That and an update from CCIA regarding seed certification, I think would be the two that I would include.
Yeah, and this is Josh again. So the only other thing that I can think of off the top of my head that I know we had gotten some questions on was pesticides. I know that the board had a presentation from the Department of Pesticide Regulation at a meeting last year, and there was a request for an update. So see if it can reach out if the board's interested in seeing if there's additional information that DPR might be able to provide at the next meeting, and that could be an additional presenter if the board would like.
All right. Any other topic for the next meeting that anyone would like to suggest at this time? Nope. All right. So in that case, yeah.
Lauren, my apologies. We did get a raised hand and some comments right after. Is it possible we can go back to the public comments?
Sure.
Okay. So we have Justin who raised his hand. So Justin, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, appreciate it. Wanted to make a request or ask the board if they can make a request to add some permanent topics or agenda items as far as reviewing the revenue and disbursements of funds for the program at every single board meeting as a report moving forward. And in addition to reporting on the revenue of where the disbursements are, also adding a staff report. I don't know if we can outline who's been hired or any reporting on staffing about the program specifically. And then also request that I think you guys do a pretty good job at making sure that a permanent item is legislation, any current legislation, and also any OAL laws that are being reviewed or any OAL conversations that are happening around regulatory affairs, things that want to be submitted to OAL as permanent agenda items. See if the board could make a request to add those and vote on that in this conversation right now to make those permanent agenda items moving forward, that every time we meet for Industrial Hemp Advisory Board, that those items are addressed and reported on as permanent agenda items. If the board could make a request and vote on that, that would be great leading up to the new appointments.
All right. Thank you, Justin. I think one of your requirements is fairly reasonable. At least the first one, and that would be the accounting. And I believe we've had at least the last few meetings, we have gotten an accounting, basically money brought in, money spent. Is that something that we could make permanent, or at least information that was made available at each meeting? Josh?
Hey, Lawrence. So yeah, this is Josh. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've been presenting that information, I believe, at each of the last few meetings, including today. A lot of that information was presented. But yeah, absolutely. If the board would like to see that, that certainly can be on the agenda every single meeting. We don't have any problems with that, really, unless we had a specific topic for a board meeting that we were going to really try to get into depth with and didn't want to spend additional time when there was another meeting coming up that we were going to be discussing those things, which we've done a couple of times with this board, but not very often. Yeah, no, we have no problem with that, and we don't need a board motion to move forward with that. That can be something that we will just continue to do, and we can further clarify on the agenda moving forward, if again, if that's what you would like to see.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable, and I don't think we necessarily have to talk about it, have it as an agenda item for each meeting unless it's relevant to what we're going to talk about that day, but it can certainly be part of the information that we receive. And the other question that, or request that Justin had to do with, I believe, the staffing of the CDFA in regards to the industrial hemp program. Is that something that's normally provided, Josh?
Yeah, so just to be clear, so I mean, yeah, we did provide an update. I provided a very brief update on the number of staff that are currently working on the program. That's something that we've continued to provide, and that's something that we would normally include when we're providing budget reporting anyway. But just so everyone's clear, we do have, as I mentioned earlier, 4 permanent staff that are currently working on this program, including Michelle Phillips, who oversees it, as well as a couple of temporary seasonal staff that help process registration applications and things of that nature. We do have budget authority to hire up to 2 additional permanent staff. That's something that the program will look at doing moving forward based off of program needs and based off of whether or not we actually have funds to support those positions. But that's certainly something we would include in a budget report normally, and something that we can do moving forward.
All right, then I think the last part of his question or comment had to do with the Office of Administrative Law. And I tend to think you're already doing that. I mean, anything that's submitted to the Office of Administrative Law, is that public information?
Yeah, so there's 2 sides to that comment, and we have been having a legislative update, I believe, at every single meeting from Patrick. And so as far as state legislation, things that are going through either the state or federal legislature, Patrick's been providing an update on those at each meeting, and we can certainly continue to do that. That's been kind of an informal, permanent fixture on the agenda. As far as regulations and where we're at, again, that's something we've continued to update the board on as far as program activities. But if the board would like further engagement on regulations as we move forward, that's something that we can explore with the board as far as what exactly that would look like. But yeah, absolutely, that's something we continue to update the board at each meeting as far as what the current status is on any actions that we're taking or any actions that are being proposed.
All right, thank you, Joshua. All right, do we have any
and Larry,
further? Yeah,
Larry, if we could just make sure that, so we have the reporting is a permanent item. We wanted to make sure that it's specific to any regulatory conversations around submission to OAL, not just a report from Patrick, but specifically an agenda item, any statutory or regulatory conversation, however you want to frame that, about, and to make this a permanent agenda item about submission previous to OAL. I don't know if we can get that specific in there, but that's the discussion that we want to have about that. And then also we'd like to request as well to get on there about the federal plan. I think that's the only other thing that I could think of there is have that as an agenda item of, I know that the plan that we have in place is the federal plan, but maybe there could be a committee. I don't know if we can make a request to have a subcommittee of the board, but I'd like that as a permanent agenda item as well. I think that's good that there are top things that we need to address at every single meeting. So I don't know if we could request, Larry, that those are permanent agenda items, not just something that we have been doing, but specifically that they're permanent agenda items around OAL, and then specifically making a plan if we have to form a subcommittee, but just making sure that those are every single month reported and are agenda items that can be open for public comment and are focused on with, and that we're going to follow up with them every single month, not just do a report, but actually it's an item that's going to be continually discussed.
all right. I'm not positive, since every meeting we set the agenda item. I'm not positive we can always say this will be on every single meeting that we have. We can certainly request to have it on, each meeting, have it requested to be on the following meeting. Does anyone else on the board have a comment on Justin's recommendation?
Hey, Lawrence, this is Josh. So before you move on, so I mean, as far as having stuff like that be on every regular board meeting, CDFA doesn't have any problem with that. If the board has a special meeting that they would like to schedule, for instance, the real only reason I brought that up, and the reason that I would think would be to discuss specific regulations, seek board and public comments on those, and get in depth on a particular topic. If the board would like to do a special meeting around a particular topic, I think obviously we would want to try to make sure we stay focused, especially in the current times where people are calling in from home. We're trying not to do 8-hour meetings. That's to everyone's benefit, but then having, as was suggested, the regularly scheduled meetings, the regular meetings, having those updates. And CDFA has no objection to that if that's what the board would like to see.
All right, well, I don't see any problem having that be as part of a regular scheduled item. I don't think we necessarily have to vote on that to have it on there, but we can certainly request that we do have those items for the next meeting, and I'll make that comment now that it should be at least on the next meeting. Do we have any other questions or comments from the public?
Yes, we still have one. Yes. So we still have one from Wayne Richmond and then one written comment. So Wayne, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you can go ahead and speak. And if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, actually, what I wanted to comment on, since it's the last meeting of this board, is to thank all of the board members for their service. It's been a long haul, 3 years, and we've all seen ups and downs, and it's like birthing a new baby. But at the end of the day, I know everybody who was actively involved did a yeoman's job, and I just wanted to say thank you. Hopefully, we can set before the end of this meeting today, set a firm time for the next meeting. And a resolution to set meetings for at least 30 days thereafter going forward, just out of respect and a sense of urgency on behalf of our farmers. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Wayne. All right, so any other people wanting to make a question or comment or next agenda item?
Yeah, so we have two comments from Mr. Stan Withy. I want to grow industrial hemp farm, making hempcrete as a cost-effective building material for sustainable housing. Where do I get seed and the permissions to grow here in California? My project is a small scale with a potential of 5 to 25 acres. Is there a resource for accessing machinery to process hemp?
All right, I would answer that, and I would say, yes, there are people in the state of California that are providing that sort of product and information that can definitely help you. It's not really something that the board does. I don't know if the Department of Agriculture actually answers these sorts of questions, or they refer it to some of the hemp organizations that are out there. But the answer is yes, it is available, and I would probably recommend the Hemp Industries Association or some of the other hemp organizations that can probably lead you in the right direction.
Yeah, Wayne, this is Josh. I'll just add really quickly to that. So yeah, I mean, as far as the registration requirements and things of that nature, please reach out to our staff or your local county agricultural commissioner regarding questions on resources and making those sorts of connections. Your best options are usually either to go to one of your industry associations, whether that's the Hemp Industries Association, California Hemp Association, California Hemp Council, Farm Bureau, etc., or your local county cooperative extension farm advisors. The UC Cooperative Extension also often are able to there may be limit on what kinds of recommendations they can provide, but are a really good source of information for growers who have questions and who maybe need advice as far as being able to move forward with what they're planning on doing. So between those two, those are usually your best sorts of information. If you have questions on the regulatory side of things and how to comply with those, that's when we recommend you reach out to either County Agricultural Commissioner or to CDFA, and we'll work with the county to try to get you whatever information you need.
All right, any other questions or comments?
And then Wayne raised his hand once more, so Wayne, I'll go ahead and unmute you. It might have been out of error. So that's all the comments we have, and anybody who has requested to speak.
All right, thank you. All right, so why don't we try to set the date for the next meeting? It seems like the public would like us to have a meeting as soon as possible. This goes to a question, the next meeting we have, do we feel it would have to be another remote meeting, or will situation be that we're able to have a meeting up in Sacramento? And that I probably defer to Josh or some of the other people there, what their opinion is on that.
Hey, Wayne, so this is Josh. So at this time, the department's moving forward with web meetings for all meetings and for the foreseeable future. If that changes, we can certainly make adjustments, but at this point, we are moving forward with web-based options. As we get more experience with them, we'll be able to kind of expand our capabilities. But I personally would recommend, especially if we're doing a meeting soon, to move forward with a web-based option. And if hopefully GoToWebinar was working out for everybody, and we can continue using that. I think we've used it for many years now and are relatively familiar with it. But that would be kind of my recommendation. And then as far as the next meeting date, we would recommend, since Michelle isn't able to be on the line, if the board could set maybe a few options on dates that are a certain number of weeks out, and then Michelle can coordinate with Lawrence as far as setting the actual meeting date, just to try to make sure that she would hopefully be available. I think that would be helpful. But as far as the number of weeks and an approximate date, maybe the board can come up with some options that Michelle can work with you guys on.
All right, this is really quick, talking to the rest of the board. Earliest, if we wanted to really hustle on this, the earliest would probably be a month from now, which would be around the end of June. Other than that, maybe we would go into July, but I would like to ask the board, what are their thoughts on that? Do you think we should try to have another meeting within a month, or we should wait maybe 6 weeks or more before we have another meeting? No comments from anybody? I mean, what are your schedules like? And also, it also depends if you're going to still be on the board in a month or so. I don't personally, I don't mind. I can have one next month, although I do know taking 3-4 hours out of the day can be difficult for some people. So anyone want to comment on that at all?
This is Val Milano. I'm available almost all days in the summer. It's easier for me. I'm happy to participate, especially in a Zoom meeting.
All right, thank you, Val.
Anytime.
Anyone else?
A month or 6 weeks, it doesn't matter. I'm not sure I'm going to still be on the board, but if I am, I will be available.
All right, anyone else have a comment on that? No? All right, well, why don't we, I'll get with Michelle. We'll try to have it around the end of June, but we will probably put out, I'll have her put out a doodle poll and see what date will work best for everyone. And then we can get it totally figured out by then. And once again, if you do have topics that you'd like, email me, let me know, or Michelle knows, so we can discuss and put it on the agenda. All right, any other
Lawrence?
final?
Yes, this is Josh. So, I mean, just as far as, there was a request to try to get, at least as much information out there to the public as possible as far as the next date. So you're thinking like the week of June 29th and seeing if we can make that work for the board?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's try to shoot for that, and you can work with Michelle to try to make a day that week work for as many board members as possible.
All right, very good. Any other
Thank you.
final questions or comments? Nope. Okay, then I will adjourn the meeting, adjourned by Lawrence Sertman, and it is 12:32 p.m. All right, thank you everybody for attending the meeting.
Thank you, Lauren.